it's hard, right? You don't want to leave the guys on the front line and go back, but you have to, discretion is the better part of valor. You have to think through what you're doing. People in Venezuela are eating dogs. They're eating out of the trash. People are dying from easily treatable diseases. And so that's the kind of supplies and stuff that we're getting in there. And I want to be able to expand that. I want to be able to do that more. But when I spoke with the FBI agent, he asked me, he said, did they pay you? Did the Venezuelan guys pay you? And I said, no. We're a nonprofit. Everything we do is for free. They don't buy anything from us. They don't give us anything. We're not there to take anything from them. We're only there to provide medical training and medical supplies. I count to 60. Before I get to 60, boom, this explosion goes off. And then doom, 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 more mortars, boom, boom, boom. And so the village we were in just started getting bombarded by the Burma army. And we knew immediately, okay, the Burma army, they're counterattacking. And there's 40 millimeter and mortars and stuff just coming in, just decimating this place.
Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome back my next guest to the podcast. He was on episode 53, so I'm going to spare some of the bio, but I still want to hit the highlights. He was a U.S. Navy SEAL. He started Stronghold Rescue. He's the author of City of Death. He's been all over the fucking world, both as a SEAL and after with Stronghold Rescue. We're going to kind of get into the post-Syria, Iraq apocalypse time that he spent in Southeast Asia and some other parts, most exclusively Burma. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage again, Ephraim Mattos 2.0.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I know we've been trying to coordinate this for a while. And you've been gone most of that time, I think. So if you could, like for the listener, if you haven't listened to episode 53, check that out. Hit the pause button, listen to that, and then listen to this because there's hours of backstory that got you to where you're back sitting on the couch that I don't want to rehash that and have a 12-hour episode. So if you could just kind of pick up where we left off and what the hell have you been doing since the last time we talked?
Well, last time we spoke was right before COVID hit. Yeah. So since then, obviously things have been very interesting. So there was actually a year and a half there where I wasn't able to go overseas just because of the travel restrictions and everything. But Stronghold's work actually continued because the way that we operate is we enable teams of locals to be able to do the work that we set up. So we were still, smuggling medical supplies and stuff into Venezuela. And that was our main mission for a while there. We were still getting supplies into Burma and doing medical relief and humanitarian relief into Burma, but it was all being run by locals, and we didn't have anybody boots on ground at the time. Obviously, now that the situation has changed, we're now back boots on the ground, fully out there in the field working with the people. But yeah, since then, I guess we were also in Ukraine a little bit. We also went to Mozambique, and we started working with park rangers there. So there's a lot of different things that are going on. It's really exciting.
So I guess before we get into kind of the meat and potatoes of Southeast Asia, during the COVID stuff, you're still smuggling medical supplies, et cetera, into South America. Was there any that you can kind of get into? I know that there was a significant issue. Guys got rolled up. Some Americans got rolled up. Did that impact you? And can you kind of speak to what you guys were doing down there, from afar? Yeah,
absolutely. So that whole debacle, unfortunately, did affect us because we got associated with it, even though we had nothing to do with it. So. Basically, our mission at the time was we had a children's refuge set up right on the Colombian-Venezuela border in a little Colombian town called Cucuta. And it's right there on the Venezuelan border. I've been down there a bunch of times. And again, our mission is strictly humanitarian and medical in nature. And during that time, this is back in 2019, so right before I'd actually been on the show, the first time in 2020, We had gone down there to provide some medical supplies and medical training to a bunch of Venezuelan guys who had left. They had left Venezuela. They were pro-democracy guys, and so they were anti-Maduro. At the time, there was still a chance that Maduro would be overthrown. There was a chance that democracy could be restored in the country. And so a lot of those guys went into Colombia, and the Colombian government accepted them, and the Colombian government actually paid to put these guys up in hotels and take care of them. Several hundred of these Venezuelan pro-democracy defectors. So really, really good guys. And so basically what happened is after a few months, the Colombian government wasn't able to continue sort of supporting these guys. And so they spread out throughout Colombia in these small little camps. The Colombians knew exactly where they were. Everything was totally above board. And while we were down there doing the humanitarian thing, we were asked if we would come and provide these guys some medical support, and we provided them some medical training. And so I said, yeah, absolutely. We're more than happy to come down there and meet these guys. So we had never met them. We had never interacted with them before. And so we went down there, myself and 2 other guys, and we spent, I think it was like 10 days or almost 2 weeks. It was around 10 days working with these Venezuelan guys in Colombia. And we were just doing medical training over and over and over again. Honestly, it's like it could have been done in 3 days, but we spent like a week and a half with these guys, and they were really incredible, really, really good guys. They were very motivated, very kind. They took care of us. They, at one point, because we're Americans, they assumed we wanted, they assumed that we would want hamburgers and French fries. So they actually went out, I'm not even kidding, they went out and like bought potatoes and cut them and like fried them and like did all this stuff to like try to make a hamburger and French fries for us. It was like just really, really, really good camaraderie. We lived with them in the same house that they were in, and just did just an absurd amount of just basic medical training over and over again. So as the leader of the organization, my intention with that was I thought, okay, this is perfect. If the Venezuelan government, if these guys are able to go back into Venezuela and take the country back at some point, that's great. We can go in with these guys and we can provide medical support, and we can also provide humanitarian aid. This is what we do. We go into conflict zones, and this is what we do. And if they're not able to go back into the country, they at least know how to operate along the border, and we can get more and more humanitarian and medical supplies into the country. Because keep in mind, at this point, people in Venezuela are eating dogs. They're eating out of the trash. People are dying, especially children, from easily treatable diseases. Just a bad fever is killing kids, and you can just give them a simple pill that'll break the fever. And so that's the kind of supplies and stuff that we're getting in there. And I want to be able to expand that. I want to be able to do that more.
I'm going to take a quick break. I do want to let you guys know the way that you can support the show is to support our sponsors. I know some people don't like to hear ads, but that's how I do what I do for a living. So any support you can show for our gracious sponsors is much appreciated. And again, it does support the show. So thank you. What are the 2 key components for canine success? That's effective training and proper nutrition. Fueled by Team Dog brings those 2 components to your family and best friend. The perfect nutritional balance that results in a higher mental acuity, energy, overall vitality, and even an improved appearance. Every product you will find in my company's store was born from the battlefield and not from the boardroom. Let my life's work help you become your dog's hero.
So we were working with these guys, and so while we were talking, though, we'd have these long conversations with them, and they started telling me about there was a plan to take back Venezuela. And keep in mind, this is the first time I've ever heard of this, and I'm like, okay, that's very interesting. And then they started telling me that that there were Delta Force guys down there who were preparing, like Delta Force and agency guys who were down there preparing and to help them take back the country. And that the U.S. Navy was going to be involved, and they were going to get helicopters to do a simultaneous insertion. They were going to go kill or capture Maduro at the same time that they were going to basically invade the country and take it back. And there was a bunch of forces ready to join them. And so there was this big plan, and I thought, oh dear God, like what have I stepped into? So I said, okay, hey man, like that's great, that's awesome.
We're not here for that.
I was like, we're not here for that, but B, like if I was like, here's my number, here's all my information. Give this to the agency guys or the Delta guys. I was like, give this to them and tell them they can reach out to me if they ever want to. I was like, we're not trying to step on anybody's toes. We're not trying to get involved in anything. We will happily disappear and get away because I just stepped into something that I was like, probably shouldn't be involved in, or definitely shouldn't be involved in. So while this was happening, they then showed me, they're like, oh, this is the guy who's helping us. This is the guy who's leading the team down here. And so they showed me a picture of this guy, and I looked at his website and such, and I realized it was from the Silver Corp, like private military contracting company. And I was like looking at the guy who runs it. And I remember thinking, I was like, I told him, I was like, oh, there's a big miscommunication here. I was like, this guy might have been Delta Force in the past. He's not anymore. And he's a private military contractor. He's running a company, and that's not bad, but like he's not Delta Force. So you guys need to understand that. They were also saying that he's Secret Service. They were saying that he was part of President Trump's security detail. And they showed me a picture of him
at a rally with Trump or something stupid.
Exactly. Doing security at a Trump rally somewhere out in the crowd, right? And so at that point, I thought, well, maybe it's just a miscommunication. But I was like, guys, this is not agency. This is not Delta. That's not who you think this is. This is a private military contractor. But also in the back of my mind, I was like, I was thinking, there's a 1% chance that this guy is backed by agency or something. Either way, like I'm going to back out. I tell him to contact me if he wants to. And that was the only trip that we did with them. That was the only trip down there where we had worked with these guys. We gave them medical supplies. Again, it was great. They did a great job. They were really, really great guys. Well, then fast forward, I'll skip a few of the details, but fast forward to May of 2020, and we see that this attempted coup happened, and it was led by that guy who ran Silver Corp. And there was a couple of Green Berets. Well, that guy who was he was the leader of Silver Corp. He didn't even go on the mission. He was like sitting in Florida somewhere, and he sent 2 other Green Berets out there who he had told them that this whole mission was backed by the government and all this stuff. So these guys thought they were doing the right thing, from what I understand. And they ended up, of course, getting captured by the Venezuelans. The Venezuelans had infiltrated the whole thing. They knew that this attack was coming. They had agents in all of it. Some of the guys that we had worked with and given medical training to were very credibly accused of also being agents for the Venezuelan government. Yeah, so the whole thing was totally infiltrated, and it wasn't at all U.S. backed. That was one of the big things that when I saw what was going on. They kept on thinking that the U.S. government, that these Venezuelan guys thought that the U.S. government was backing them. And I kept on telling them, no, the U.S. government is not backing you, because at the time, these guys barely had enough food to eat. Like they took care of what they had. They were clean. They weren't starving by any means, but they barely had enough to sort of get by. Yeah. And I said, if the U.S. is backing you, first thing is you guys would have plenty of food, and you'd have plenty of drinking water, and
brand new Black Hawk vests.
Exactly. At some point, right? And so anyway, so because of this, so right before that attack had happened, I had spoken with a journalist who had asked me about this coup attempt that was going to happen, right? So I had spoken with this guy back, and I think from the Associated Press back in, I think April, I want to say, could have been March or April. And I'd kind of told him what I had seen down there, and I had said, yeah, there's this guy running around down there trying to set up this coup, and it's going to cause a problem. And in my mind, I thought there was a 0% chance that they would actually pull the trigger and do it. I thought, this is so beyond stupid and so careless and so reckless and just so just illegal and ridiculous. Like there's so many reasons why you wouldn't try to go assassinate.
Seen too many movies.
You've seen way too many movies. Yeah. And so I had been quoted in this article sort of talking about this. And so that article came out, I want to say, don't quote me on the dates here, but I believe that article came out May 1st. And then completely independently, May 3rd was the day that they did this attack. And the Green Berets were captured, and they attempted to infiltrate Venezuela. And so the only article that was out there was this one from several days prior. And so everybody immediately associated me and Stronghold with this coup attempt. And so then I immediately, so of course my initial reaction was, all right, I just have to get out there and talk about this. I can't sit here and hide. I can't sit here and pretend like I didn't know any of these guys. Because some of the Venezuelan guys who were getting, who were on TV handcuffed, I was like, oh, I know that guy. Oh, I know that guy. Oh, I know that guy as well. And so I recognized some of these guys. And so I ended up speaking with everybody. New York Times, Rolling Stone, Vanity Fair, Financial Times, everybody. I spoke with all these people, and I gave unedited, long interviews with all of them. And I said, hey, here's what happened. Here's what's going on. We weren't associated with it. And the other detail as well is I had actually tried to contact the guy who the former Green Beret, who was not a Delta guy, by the way, who had set this whole thing up.
The Silver Corps guy.
Yeah, I had contacted him actually on Instagram, and I said, hey man, like your name keeps popping up a bunch, and the Venezuelan guys kept on saying, hey, yeah, this mission's going down. We're gonna go do this thing, and so I tried to contact him and like try to figure out what was going on, and my intention was to warn him and say, hey man, like these guys think that you're gonna get their country back for them. I don't know what's going on, but you should probably cool it a little bit. And so he saw the message and he responded. We were going to talk at one point, and then he just stopped responding and all that. So part of me feels a little guilty when I look at the guys who were captured. I feel a little guilty. I feel like I should have done more to stop it. I feel like I should have done more.
I mean, what could or would you have done?
I'm not sure. I mean, maybe I should have been more adamant to get in contact with this guy. Maybe I should have been more adamant with the Venezuelan guys and said, hey, this is not American backed. This is just some private military contractor trying to make something happen, trying to make a bunch of money. And later on you find out, yeah, he had some sort of contract with the opposition regime, or the opposition government, excuse me, in Venezuela. And he was going to make like millions and millions of dollars and oil rights and all this other stuff. If he had pulled it off, right? Wow. So it's,
man, that's fucking wild.
Yeah. So I just feel bad for the guys. I feel like I kind of let them down. I feel like I should have been, I don't know, a little more adamant and could have maybe saved some of their lives. But
yeah, what happened to them?
They're all in prison
still.
Oh yeah, everybody's in prison. That's the guys who haven't been executed. I mean, it's Venezuela, right? Yeah. So who knows where guys really are at?
So how many Americans got rolled up to begin with?
2.
Okay.
Just 2, and they're still in prison down in Venezuela.
Yeah,
yeah.
But they're still alive.
Last I heard, yeah, they're still alive. They're being, from what I understand, they're being fairly well treated. Probably so use them as they can be used as negotiating pawns at some point in the future. Wow. Yeah.
So two questions, I guess, as it relates to the whole South America stuff is that when you were there, were there any close calls? I mean, you said there were there was infiltration that had happened, after the fact, or you realized it after the fact. Were there any like super close calls while you were actually there?
No, nobody ever messed with us.
No.
I think what happens. So anytime we go into these different areas, I also have a funny story about this one in Ukraine as well. But like every time I go into a place, like the first words out of my mouth are, "Hi, my name is Ephraim Mattos. I'm from Stronghold Rescue Relief. I do not represent the U.S. government." That's literally the first sentence out of my mouth every time I meet with somebody, because you have to be very clear about that. But guys, but the people that you're working with, and a lot of times the people who are watching you and seeing you, they all assume that you're agency or DEA or FBI or something. They always assume that. And so we just have to like very loudly say constantly that we're not. But my point is, they wouldn't like mess with us unless we entered Venezuela, which we never did.
Yeah. So where were you guys staying?
What do you mean when we were down there?
Yeah.
So we were in a little,
that's right, Colombia.
We were in Colombia.
Okay.
Yeah, all of this was happening in Colombia. Yeah.
The other question I had, has the United States government approached you, and this will be for every place you've been, but so feel free to just answer this one, but have they contacted you for an interview, information, even almost like a cease and desist kind of thing? Like, have they ever come down your or gotten in your ass about your involvement there specifically?
No, but they were going to because of all this stuff that had come out. So I immediately was like, "Hey, get me in contact with the FBI." And I pulled a couple different people from my network and tried to figure out who I needed to talk to. And I reached out to them. I reached out to the FBI and I spoke with them several times and had very long conversations with them. And yeah, and the agent, when I spoke to him, he said, he's like, oh yeah, he's like, you're on our list to talk to. And I was like, perfect. Yeah. I was like, hey, whatever you guys want to know, like just,
do I get extra credit for calling you first?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Did they give you any like direction or advice? Like, hey, you may want to not do this, or hey, stop doing, like, have they ever given you any of that kind of shit?
No, but when I spoke with the FBI agent, he brought up a really good point. He asked me, he said, did they pay you? He said, did the Venezuelan guys pay you? And I said, no. We're a nonprofit. Everything we do is for free. They don't buy anything from us. They don't give us anything. We're not there to take anything from them. We're only there to provide medical training and medical supplies. And he said, oh, that's really, really good.
Yeah.
So
in other words, don't let them buy anything.
Yeah. And again, we never would. That's not what we do. So it's just funny that's something that he brought up.
Yeah. Well, I guess they don't give you anything except for the hamburger meals, right?
Exactly.
Does that count?
Well, no, we actually paid for it. We paid for it. So we bought all the food while we were there. We paid for everything. Yeah.
That's good shit. So, all right. So you kind of get past that. COVID slows down enough to where you can start traveling again. Where's your next place after that?
So during COVID, I personally actually had a back injury right after I was on your show. Actually, I was in the gym, popped something in my back, and I was down hard for several months. I was going to the chiropractor 3 days a week to get my back popped back into alignment, just so I could walk around. I was deadlifting.
Yeah, of course you were.
Yeah, but I was doing lightweight, high reps, and I just bad form, just popped something. And so anyway, for about a year, even mostly during COVID and then into 2021, like I really couldn't travel all that much. And so I really started being able to get back in the field end of 2021. We were in Haiti for a short time, and that was our mission there. Again, was we were working with the Haitian police and helping them with the again medical training and medical supplies, and getting those guys qualled up in that. And we were hoping to be able to do more in Haiti, but we basically needed an agreement with the Haitian government. I learned my lesson with Colombia and Venezuela and all that. So it's like, I'm not working with anybody until I have paperwork saying that I can work with you. And there's a memorandum of understanding that we have and that you have and all that. So we weren't able to work that out with the Haitian government. We may go back down there and do some more work with them in the future. So, but that mission ended up switching we did a bunch of humanitarian relief to remote villages around Haiti, where just abject poverty and all that. And then the next big trip was, for me personally, was Ukraine.
Okay.
When that all popped off.
And so I've had a couple other guys on the show that have done a lot of work in Ukraine. I guess I'm curious from kind of a 30,000 foot view as it relates to Stronghold. Is there a prioritization of where you go, what allocation of resources? Because obviously there is a shitload of places that need help. How do you guys determine, where you go and what gets your attention, and how do you break down, like, okay, I mean, do you do it where it's like, oh, Ukraine's going to get 25% of our attention, Burma's going to get X number? Like, how do you kind of figure that out?
Yeah. So the first and foremost is we only deal with situations that are black and white, good versus evil, right? We don't go in any place where there is sort of a gray area where, I mean, any place you go in is going to have two different sides, of course, but we don't go into anywhere that's not very, very clearly good versus evil, good guys versus bad guys. That's one. The next thing is we only work in places where we're wanted. Like you said, there's 1,000 different places we could be working, but only a handful of them will welcome you with open arms and say, yes, please, here, we'll please help us, right? You'd be surprised, you'd be shocked at the bureaucracy and stuff that can happen in a lot of places. And that's sort of the issue we ran into with Haiti. It's like there's so much work that we can do to help, but there's also a ton of bureaucracy, right? So we focus on places where we're actually able to get in and help. We're not going to spend half of our energy and effort arguing with the government, like arguing with the people that we're trying to help. We're not going to do that. And then the third thing is, for the most part, we try to focus on areas where it's sort of things are at a critical tipping point, right? So where's the emergency? Like, where's the fire? We'll go to help try to put that fire out a little bit. So with Ukraine, we we were in there not right at the beginning, but maybe a month or so into the fighting. So the Russians were still advancing on Kyiv when I was in Kyiv. They hadn't stopped and turned around yet. But we only had teams on the ground there for a few months toward like end of May of, I guess that would have been 2022. Yeah. And then after that, basically the next thing is, I look at where is everyone else putting their resources, right? So there's a huge need in Ukraine for sure, but there's also a ton of attention there. And so because of that, I realized, or I just decided, hey, you know what, we're going to back off a little bit and we're just going to go double and triple down on Burma. Very, very few organizations are helping there, and that the need there is massive as well.
So two things, I guess. The first criteria that you guys have to kind of sift through is black and white. To me, there's almost nothing that's truly black and white where you can, I mean, World War II is probably the last example where you could be like, yeah, it's pretty fucking clear cut. That there's bad guys and good guys. Even then, like, you're still going to say, well, fuck, the bad guys think that they're the good guys. You know, again, that's a pretty clear cut example. Ukraine, similarly, like, it seems pretty apparent that that's, you know, woefully lopsided. Having said that, how do you determine kind of, you know, who is in the right versus not? And I guess more importantly, what I'm asking is, like, from a media bias standpoint, like, how do you guys source your intelligence or information or perspective on where you go? Because the American media is so fucking slanted. I don't care which affiliate you're looking at. And so, you know, from my perspective, like, even in other countries, like, yeah, there are some media networks that are less slanted and less biased than others, but they all are. So how do you kind of navigate and reconcile the media bias and the intelligence gathering bias? I mean, for that matter, fucking Google is slanted, woefully, like, obnoxiously slanted. So how do you kind of navigate your way through that?
So what we look at as far as good guys versus bad guys. So our mission is to focus on helping civilians who are caught in the crossfire of conflicts, right? And you can only really get to the civilians who are in these conflicts if you are working with one particular side. So with that being said, what we really look at is sort of human rights abuses. Which side is raping and murdering and slaughtering civilians? Which side is not? If both are doing it, we're not getting involved. Yeah. If both are even remotely involved in it, we're not getting involved. So that's what we really look. We really look at how are the civilians in the middle being impacted, and that's who we focus on. As far as figuring out the media, all that stuff, we honestly don't even pay attention to it. We put guys on the ground to go look at it. So that's what we'll do. Either myself or one of the guys on the team or a couple of us will go there and spend a couple of weeks and go make contacts, talk with people, see the real situation, look at it on the ground before we invest any kind of significant resource. We're not. We go basically do our own intel, and we gather all that, and then we decide how we're gonna handle it.
That's fucking brilliant. Can you talk about the rest of the team, or are they?
Yeah, I can. I could talk about them in sort of vague terms. So right now we have a very small team. It's a very small, tight-knit team. One of my rules that I have at Stronghold is we never put more than 4 guys into a country at the same time. I've only broken that rule one time, and that was for Haiti, and that was because people were being kidnapped like crazy, so we needed to be in bigger numbers. So the rule is no more than 4 outsiders in the country at a time, or on a particular mission at a time. And there are a lot of reasons for that. It allows us to move around free and easy, keeps the cost down, and also too, it's enough men that you can help, but it's not enough that you can do everything for the locals, right? So when we go in and set up a medical team or set up a medical mission, or we're setting up ambulances in Burma right now, we have a jungle ambulance service. It's all run by the locals, and we pull in locals, we train them, and we enable them. So I call it charity with dignity. So I don't want to just go and give people a fish unless there's an emergency, right? I want to teach them how to fish, right? And
you're going full Jesus? Is that what's happening?
Yes, yes. We're there to spread the gospel for sure. No, but it's that's sort of our our MO as far as keeping the number small. So with that being said, we do keep the members of the team incognito. Myself, I'm the only one who's in the field who's publicly talking about the stuff that we're doing. Everyone's on NDAs and is not allowed to talk publicly about all this stuff, unless, of course, the government or something wants to talk to them. Of course, like go talk, answer any questions. So yeah, we have a couple guys on the team. We have several guys that are full time. Some guys that we pull in as contractors. We have a handful of guys, like just a couple who we will allow to come volunteer with us. That's another thing. We don't bring in lots of volunteers, simply because we need to provide a good service to the individuals, or to the people that we're helping. And while volunteers do great work, you just don't know if they'll be there in a month or in 2 months. Yeah. So we make sure that if we're making a promise to these people that we're serving and helping, we need to make sure that we can actually staff it and help them in the long term. So yeah, all the guys on the team, they are veterans. Everyone's been in combat. Again, not that that's what we do, but I can't have somebody's first time, getting shot at, being, in the middle of the jungle and
not knowing what it's like.
Yeah, I just can't. I can't take that risk. Yeah. Some of the guys that we work with or most of the guys that we work with are ex special whatever, SEAL, Ranger, Green Berets, things of that nature. But we also do have a couple guys as well that we work with who were just like regular guys. But what I found is that the whole special forces, SEAL, all that stuff really doesn't even matter with the kind of work that we do. And guys who have a more sort of simple military background, oftentimes they actually do better because they come in with much less of an ego. So maybe they don't have as many of the sort of the hard skills or as much training, but I find that typically they can be a lot more humble and they're willing to learn and they're willing to serve and to help. Whereas sometimes other guys come in with big egos and they're all like, oh, let's go, kill the bad guys. And you're like, no, dude, we're here to do medical work. Like, calm down.
Yeah. That's wild. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a quick minute to talk about our sponsor, Manscaped. Spring has sprung, and our good friends at Manscaped have the best tools for some spring cleaning. They've already helped us tidy up the nooks and crannies of your body's basement, but this year Manscaped can help you get the perfect presentation on that beautiful face with the new Beard Hedger Pro kit. Make sure you look your best this spring by using the code MICDROP to get 20% off, plus free shipping at manscaped.com. That is, MICDROP is the code for 20% off and free shipping. In terms of taming your mane, I will say as a possessor of beards, this product is a phenomenal product for a number of reasons. Number one, the quality. It's very, very well built, and you get that impression the second that it's in your hand. The battery seems to last forever on it, which for me is convenient because I travel a fair bit, and it's nice to be able to take it and not have to worry about bringing the charger and all that shit. It's got 20 different hair cutting lengths, which, for those of you with the big Fu Manchu or, the Mike Beltran referee style beard, you have a lot of different options. In terms of the quality of materials, there's titanium coated T-blades. It's tough on hair, but it is really smooth on your face. I mean, you can still trim your undercarriage even with the beard hedger and still not have any problems, which I can certainly appreciate. The kit also comes with some liquid goods. It's got beard shampoo and conditioner, which if you don't want to look like the Unabomber and you just rolled out of bed with shit spraying every which direction, that shampoo and conditioner can certainly hook you right up. The beard oil also does a good job at giving you that silky smooth finish that all the ladies love, and dudes sometimes, let's be honest. And the beard balm is a kind of a pomade style if you want to get really crazy with it, which certainly plenty of folks do. So it's got eucalyptus, rosemary, lavender essential oils infused into it. Makes you smell exactly how you want to smell when you're grooming up your beard. So the Beard Hedger Pro Beard Kit also comes with 3 gifts, which is a brush, a comb, and scissors to ensure that your beard is ready to impress. So again, I want to say that Manscaped's been great to us. I use their product most days, and it's been a very, very good staple part of my routine for all my grooming needs, and that's top to bottom. So 20% off, code MikeDrop, which is 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. Again, that code is MikeDrop, all one word. Thank you much. So when you were in Ukraine, it was early on, and you guys pivoted and decided it had enough attention to where you'd go elsewhere. But in the amount of time that you were there, were there any significant incidents that you guys encountered?
So when we were there, our mission was to. So when I was in Kyiv, the Russians were still advancing on the city. So there was still occasionally artillery and airstrikes and stuff would come in. But what we were doing, just the one contact that we had in Ukraine, we were basically helping a group of civilians who were all conscripted, and we were helping them sort of prepare their medical plan and prepare evacuation routes and all this stuff for the Russians to advance. So they basically there was a handful of people. Their job was to defend this one particular road if the Russians came down that road in the middle of Kyiv. So a really, really bizarre situation, very emergency kind of. Oh man, we got to get this sorted really quick. And we worked with those guys. We trained with those guys. And when the Russians stopped advancing on Kyiv and started pulling back, that's when we shifted down to Odessa, because we thought that that's where they were going to open up the next front. So that was sort of our main thing. But with that being said, there were two significant instances that happened while we were there. One was we were staying in a home provided to us by a wealthy Ukrainian family that we just randomly had met them, and they said, "Oh, we have this house and you can stay in it." So that's where we were staying. But what we were told by this couple who let us stay in their house, one of their houses, they told us that the wife's mother was in occupied territory. She was in occupied Russian territory, and they hadn't heard from her, and they didn't know where, really what was going on with her. I believe she had Alzheimer's or something to that effect, and she, had gone radio silent since the Russians showed up. And when the Russians pulled back from Kyiv, they had gone as far as a neighborhood called Bucha, and so when they pulled out of Bucha, that's where this elderly lady had been at an old folks home there. Well, when the Russians pulled back and the Ukrainian forces moved back into Bucha, they found just I don't know the exact numbers, but I saw photos of it, so it had to be at least in the hundreds of people, of Ukrainian civilians just executed in the streets. Their bodies everywhere. Women had been raped, their bodies piled on top of each other and burned. And they found this old lady amongst a pile of other elderly people from the old folks' home. They'd all been taken out on the street, stripped naked, and shot in the back of the head, and just left there in the middle of the road as the Russians were pulling back. So again, we go back to this, good guy versus bad guy, black versus white, good versus evil sort of thing. And when I saw that and I saw the photos, and I just, it's that's one of those things you don't ever unsee. Mm-hmm. But it just reminded us, okay, this is why we're here. And granted, we're not up on the front lines fighting. That's not our job. And we will defend ourselves if attacked, of course. But this is why we're here, helping these people. So that was one significant event. The other significant event, I had actually just left Ukraine to come back to the States, and we still had a couple guys in the field, and they had actually moved far out to the east. We had a contact there who had asked for help. There was a bunch of basically conscript civilians on the front line, or Ukrainian civilians on the front line, who are now trying to hold off the Russian advance in one of the Russian cities. And so our guys were asked to go up there and bring in a whole bunch of medical supplies and teach them, okay, here's a tourniquet, here's how you use it. And so a couple of our guys went up to the front line and were there getting bombed and artillery and everything right next to the Ukrainians, right there, like literally on the front line as the Russians are still advancing. And they spent several days up there, but then they were sleeping at night they would sleep in a bunker, which had a big mural of Lenin, not of Stalin, but of Lenin. So this is like an old Soviet bunker, like a nuclear bunker way underground. And so anyway, my guys called me and they said, hey man, can we pull back? This situation appears way too dicey. We can hardly do the medical training because we're constantly in foxholes. Can we pull back, do the training, 100 miles back or whatever? And it's like, they basically told me, they're like, dude, we're going to die if we stay up here. And so I said, yes, absolutely. You guys have eyes on the situation. Do what you think is the right thing to do. I'd fully support it. So they leave that same day. They leave all the medical supplies and they leave to go back to this other city and set up another sort of training there. Well, I believe it was, I don't know the exact time frame on it. It was within 48 to 72 hours later. The Russians overran that position where the guys had been. And we got a report that the Ukrainians told our guys that Russian soldiers with night vision goggles went down into that bunker and killed everybody that was in that bunker and then left.
Holy shit.
So yeah, our guys had been there, right? So
how many of your guys?
It was only two guys up front at that point. And yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like the quality of guys that we have who have to, like, they have to make these tough decisions. It's hard, right? You don't want to leave the guys on the front line and go back, but you have to, discretion is the better part of valor. You have to think through what you're doing. And so like those particular guys, it was Adam and Jason, and like so much respect for those guys. Like they did like a perfect job and they made the right decision and they made a tough call and ultimately it saved their life. And that's the kind of guys that we need.
Yeah. In that kind of same vein, do you have almost a Stronghold boot camp that when you bring guys in, obviously they have their own skill sets and training experience, but before you go in there, do you guys have like an in-house training program? Do you send them through any training? And then also, do you have like a capture protocol or if the balloon goes up, if this happens, red pill, blue pill, whatever, like do you have kind of scenario based, here's how you are to conduct yourself, the same way that we go through SEER school or whatever? Do you guys have kind of an ethos or something like that in-house? So
as far as like capture protocol or something like that, no, we don't have any kind of anything in
no
place.
Cyanide pills?
There's no cyanide pills. We don't have the pills. But no, actually, so what we tell guys is if something does happen, just tell the truth. Like, you have nothing to hide. Here's who you are. Show them pictures on your phone. This is exactly who you are. Call me and get in contact with us, and we have our own network of people that can actually sort of respond to the situation. And we intentionally build a network of friends, if you will, to deal with those kind of situations.
You have your own paramilitary, is that what you're saying?
No, we have friends. We have friends. We probably have many mutual friends. Yeah, exactly. As far as training though, so we don't have any kind of particular boot camp. We're not at that level yet. We don't have that many guys. But what I do to vet guys out is I'll bring them out to a country where things are going to be relatively safe. And the biggest thing is we just need to see their personality. We need to see, are you calm? Are you trying to get into gunfights? Are you chasing it? Or do you get along well with the other guys on the other team? And we also require guys to come out and volunteer, right? So you have to come out and volunteer for a little bit, and we kind of get to know you, see what's up. We'll keep you in the back a little bit. And that's really kind of how we vet guys. And again, because like I said, the biggest thing is we can't have guys who are chasing action because that's not what we do. But that's 1% of what happens. The action stories, right? But then that's all that anybody hears because that's the story that you tell, right? You don't talk about like, oh yeah, I handed this person food. Yeah. But that's 99% of what it is. However, we do send guys through training from time to time just to keep up on skills because again, we are attacked from time to time. We do have to defend people from time to time, 1% of the time. And so we will send guys to we'll send guys to get TCCC qualified, get refreshed on that, and we'll do like last time we did it, I think it was like a year and a half ago. Everybody went and got TCCC qualified and with a live fire SWAT instructor. And we actually have a guy right now, Adam, he's going to EMT school. So we're sending him to get EMT qualified. Oh, so cool. So we're sending guys, working on professional development and upping our skill set.
It makes me think when you're talking about vetting people's character, I think the best, most efficient way to do that, not that you're asking, but I'm going to give you some unsolicited advice, take them to Vegas for a weekend. I mean, no shit, like three days, go out in Vegas and do everything. We'll tell you everything you need to know about somebody and how they handle themselves. That's a free tip.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, so I've never even spent 3 days in Vegas, so maybe I should go out there and vet myself. Yeah.
That's classic. All right, so once you've kind of decided, all right, Ukraine's got all this other shit going on and we're better served elsewhere, then you decide to get involved in Burma, correct?
Yes, and we'd also been heavily involved. I've been heavily involved in Burma since basically the beginning of Stronghold. That was like my first real Stronghold mission, but that was back when I was just sort of running around doing it myself and we had no money.
Were there any steps between the Ukraine pivot and I guess actually before you get into Burma, with Ukraine, again, I've seen, as to your point, a shitload of attention on it. Has there been any kind of pissing contest between you and some of the other groups? I can only imagine that, that space is pretty specific, but there are a lot of organizations that kind of focus on stuff in a general sense. I know you guys, each one of them has kind of their own specialty, if you will, but have you run into any like, hey, we were here first, this is our shit, get out of it? Like, have you run into any of that?
Okay, so we have a little bit. So I have several thoughts on that. First and foremost is that there's not nearly enough organizations doing nearly enough work, right? So my point is like there is so much work out there that needs to be done. So it should never be a competition. It should always be everyone working together. That's our thought process. And I'm always stoked if we go into a place and there's people there helping. That's perfect. So no, we've never had. I'm trying to think. We've never had any. We have had issues with individuals who get territorial, and it's so weird because it's you're sitting there like, hey, dude, I'm here with this medical stuff to help you. Like, what's the deal here? But you'll have people who just straight up don't want you there because it's I don't know. They get territorial about it.
Yeah, I think that's
very
rarely.
That's
an ego credit thing.
Yeah, but I will say though, those individuals, they never really represent an actual organization. Yeah. So I've never had an issue with an actual organization. Yeah. Oh, actually, okay, funny story from Ukraine. So when I first got down to Odessa, I was down there. At that point, the other guys on the team had left, and I was literally just by myself in Odessa, waiting for the Russians to invade. And so the Ukrainians had connected me with the sort of Ukrainian resistance there, the civilian resistance there. And so when I went down there, I got picked up in a car. It was very sketchy. So they were like, meet this lady. She's going to pick you up in a car and she's going to drive you somewhere. Just get in the car with her. So I get in a car with this lady, and so she starts driving me outside of the city of Odessa. And so we start talking, and she speaks a little bit of English, and she starts telling me, oh, there's a bunch of Navy SEALs who are with us and are doing training, and are training the civilian guys in tactics and all this stuff. And I thought, oh, interesting. I was like Navy SEALs, like that's, and I was like, I know that's a very specific thing to say, especially coming from somebody who doesn't speak English fluently. And so I was like, are you sure they're like Navy SEALs? Like, or do you mean like they're just in the Army, or they're Marines, or like what? She's like, no, they're Navy SEALs. They told us that they're Navy SEAls.
Which means they're not.
Yes. So spoiler alert. So I show up. So anyway, so this lady drives me outside of the city of Odessa to this abandoned industrial zone. It was like something from a movie. And then this big gate opens up, and I go into this abandoned industrial complex. It's like old Soviet, whatever. And so then I go into this building, and there's a bunch of Ukrainians in there, and they're getting training. And I hear all this yelling and stuff coming from the hallway. And I hear American voices. And they're running these guys through like a hallway clearance, and it's dark in there. Anyway, so I'm standing in there, and then one of these American guys, he's got to be like 60, clearly never been in the military in his life. He sees me, and he goes, oh, I forget what he said his name was. He's like, oh, my name's John, but I'm not here. And I was like, okay, John, like, nice to meet you. I'm Ephraim.
I am here.
Apparently, exactly. I was like, it was so awkward. So then so they finished doing the training run, and then these other two American guys come back. So this short, stocky little dude comes up to me, and he's got like a big like necklace on, and it was kind of funny. He comes up to me, and the lady says, "Oh, there's another American here." She says that to him. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't say hi. He doesn't shake my hand. Doesn't say anything. He just looks at me and goes, "Hey man, what unit were you with?" First words out of his mouth. And I was like, "What?" He's like, "What unit were you with?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, obviously these guys are not SEALs." And I was like, "Oh, I was with Team 1." And he like looks at me all cocky and he goes, "Team 1 of what?" And I go, "SEAL Team 1." And the look on this guy's face, his face just dropped. The other two guys literally, like I saw them like physically move, and they were because they were like disturbed. Shit. Yeah, exactly. And I didn't call him out on it. And so then this guy, he goes, oh, that's actually really great. And then he starts getting super friendly and super chummy with me. But yeah, so anyway, I ended up not working with those guys at all. But
did you ever find out? Like, did you ever call them out on saying that they were SEALs and they weren't? Or
no, I didn't call them out on it. I told a couple of the Ukrainian guys later. I was like, who I worked with, and I was like, yeah, those guys were not SEALs, and they were like, yeah, we know, because they could just tell. But it was just it was funny. I didn't want to cause an argument, as we're all there to help.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. All right, so getting into Burma, obviously you had involvement in there kind of from the start. If you could back up to the early involvement, and then ultimately when that became kind of the primary focus here over the last year and change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I started working there back in around, I think it was early 2018, I want to say. And basically I started going in there just as a volunteer, just seeing what I could do to help out. And at the time it was, relatively peaceful in some of the areas that I was working. So not too much happening, but over time things got a lot worse.
Could you provide kind of a synopsis on the overall situation of what's going on there and why it's a problem?
Absolutely. So the British took over Burma, several hundred years ago, and then at the end of World War II, the British left Burma. And when they left Burma, basically they left the central. So the Burman, the ethnic Burmese people, they left them with a lot of the weapons. They left them in charge of the cities and all that kind of stuff. Well, what that caused was there were several corrupt guys within the Burmese government. And so what they started doing is they started using the military to try to subjugate the other ethnic minority groups. And so long story short, World War II never ended for Burma. And so the central government itself, a non-democratically elected government, it's the military itself. They are the government, and they are trying to subjugate all the other ethnic minority tribes. And these aren't like they don't have like minor differences between the tribes, right? It's totally different ethnicities, totally different languages, totally different cultures. And so by them trying to subjugate everybody, it's just led to mass atrocities over the last 70 years, as there's been just nonstop conflict and genocide, ethnic cleansing. And then you start looking at the Burma Army's been using, selling drugs and all kinds of stuff to fund their army and to fund what they do. So it's this strange thing where it's power for the sake of power, and the government is the military. So because of that, it's not one of these situations where you can just run a good political campaign and take power, right? It's not politicians using the military corruptly. It's the exact opposite. It's just the military is in charge. And so the reason we're there helping, again, it's a good versus evil, very clear night and day, good versus evil. And the Burma government right now, the Burma Army. So also going forward, I'll use the term Burma Army because it's synonymous with the Burma government. It's the same exact thing. So the Burma Army is using aircraft to bomb villages. Their soldiers routinely rape and murder civilians all the time. And they use their power to be able to traffic drugs out of the country and into the country, and all sorts of other evil, illicit things that who only God knows.
Is it all kinds of drugs, or is it a specific?
There's a lot of different kinds of drugs. One of the drugs that they actually export a lot of is it's basically a form of crystal meth. They call it yaba, And so there's a lot of that. They make a lot of yaba pills there. And a lot of times what's interesting too is the Burma Army soldiers, they take yaba all the time. So they take this crystal meth all the time. And so it makes them particularly violent. They'll stay up for long amounts of time. It makes them courageous to the point of craziness, right? So
like a super soldier almost.
Yeah. Well, they become cannon fodder. They're no longer afraid, and so because of that, they're extremely violent and they're extremely aggressive, and they take everything out on the civilian populations who refuse to bend the knee to them. So that's a very, very short synopsis of what's going on. I will say though, so during Barack Obama's presidency, some of the sanctions were lifted on Burma, were eased a little bit because the Burma government allowed, or the Burma Army, allowed there to be a democratically elected leader, Aung San Suu Kyi. But she was more of like a puppet leader. She didn't really have the power to really do anything. The Burma Army was still in control, but because they were making moves in that direction, sanctions and stuff were eased on them. And so it was a strategic move on their part so they could, continue to build up their army. However, a couple of years ago, the Burma Army completely got rid of any, they're calling it a coup, but they basically seized power, got rid of Aung San Suu Kyi. And so now there's no semblance of democracy at all. And so what happened was that the reason that was a huge mistake was because prior to that, a lot of people who had been sort of quiet and just sort of submissive and hadn't really resisted the Burma Army too much, now the entire country, including the people in the cities, including the people who have family in the Burma Army, right? They are now rising up in revolt. And so now the situation there is astronomically more violent across the entire country. And now the Burma Army is finally beginning to weaken from, because now they're fighting everywhere. They're fighting in their own cities. They're fighting in the countryside. They're fighting in the hills. They're fighting everywhere because everyone's tired of them and wants them to go.
Can you speak to the numbers of both atrocities? Like how many people are killed on average per year or in the last 70 years? And also, what's the population of both civilian population and the size and strength of the Burma Army? Do you know?
I do not know either of those numbers, but I'll give you one major example for scale. So back in 2017, the Burma Army launched an offensive to get rid of the Rohingya Muslim tribe. And so that's in the western part of the country. And so they launched an offensive and pushed 900,000 Rohingya out of the country and pushed them into Bangladesh. So that's, so there's years where stuff like that happens. And when the Burma Army did this offensive, unfortunately, the Rohingya tribe didn't really have an organized defense. They didn't really have an organized they didn't have weapons. They didn't really have freedom fighters. They didn't have anything like that. And so that's why the Burma Army was able to push them out. And during that time, when the Burma Army was pushing the Rohingya out, the atrocities that the Burma Army was doing are just so unbelievably ridiculous. They were pulling, there's multiple instances of the Burma Army pulling babies from the arms of their mothers and throwing the babies alive into bonfires, things like that. Mass rape, mass genocide, mass graves, just slaughter on an ISIS scale, right? But it all happens in the jungle. There's not a lot of coverage of it because you just can't get in there to see what's going on. But these are the stories coming out of there, and many, many of those stories. So that's one big event that happened in 2017. But that happens on a daily basis on a micro scale all across the country. There are no numbers. That's a big question a lot of people ask, is like, what are the numbers? How many people are dying? How many civilians are killed? How many women are raped? How many? And nobody knows. Yeah. Nobody knows.
All right, guys, as you know, I'm into health and fitness and specifically how nutrition relates to it. Coffee has been a staple of mine and I think most people's for a long time. As you know, I'm a big proponent of Mudwater, which is a sponsor of this show. They have been for a while now, and we have a great partnership. I love their product. It's a phenomenal alternative to coffee. For me, coffee, there's jitters, there's mold in it. A lot of times it tends to kind of upset my stomach. But Mudwater has adaptogenic mushrooms. There's a fraction of the caffeine that coffee has. There's a little bit, but it's very, very little. And it really leans on mushrooms and the blend of matcha and chai for kind of that sustained energy that that continues to go and doesn't crash the way coffee does when it runs out. They use lion's mane for alertness, cordyceps to support physical performance, chaga and reishi to support the immune system, turmeric for soreness, and cinnamon for antioxidants. I really enjoy that first cup of warm liquid in the morning by taking mud water instead of coffee, and I'll put just a splash of heavy cream or even some protein powder, some collagen powder, and I also throw usually a couple drops of stevia or monk fruit vanilla to make it kind of a thick, normal morning coffee ritual type of concoction. And I got to tell you, it does wonders for me, and I'm really, really glad that I switched. It's been, a better part of a year now, that I've been taking that and using that as part of my daily morning routine, and it's fantastic. I love it. I can't recommend it enough. It's 100% USDA, organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, vegan, and kosher certified. And they also donate to the Berkeley Center for Science of Psychedelics, which is, groundbreaking and leading research to help veterans with PTSD and other associated illnesses and syndromes. So great cause, great company, phenomenal product. If you go to Mudwater, that's mudwtr.com/Mike to support this show and the product, and use the code MikeMud, MIKEMUD, all caps, for 15% off. That's, again, Mudwater, mudwtr.com/Mike, and the code is MikeMud, MIKEMUD, all caps, for 15% off. Go check them out. Man, that's fucking nuts. I mean, so I guess two questions. What is the United States doing outside of, or in addition to sanctions, and what do those even look like, if you know? Mm-hmm. And what about bordering countries that are any bordering countries involved in any way? Are they trying to step in? Are they trying to stay away from it?
As far as U.S. foreign policy, I think the Biden administration actually just recently passed some sort of resolution where they're now saying that they're actively supporting politically and technically the resistance groups who are fighting against the Burma army. So that's actually an important policy shift. On a practical level, that doesn't mean too much just yet, but it looks like the U.S. government and other nations are going to start sending in more humanitarian aid and what they're referring to as technical support, even for the resistance groups. What technical support means, I don't know. Yeah. So we'll see what becomes of that. It'll take, that stuff takes time, so it'll take a year or two to really see those effects. As far as bordering countries, I think there's a complicated relationship with all the different bordering countries. So Burma borders a multitude of countries, including Thailand, Laos, China, Bangladesh, India. So they have there's a lot of different stuff going on there. And keep in mind, the Burma army's been in power basically since the end of World War II, right? And so the routes out of the country, a lot of business deals, a lot of dirty business deals, a lot of drugs, a lot of stuff like that, a lot of illicit stuff has been set up, and so it's an extremely, extremely complicated border situation. So I think a lot of times the official government stance will be from the neighboring countries will be that, hey, we don't support the craziness that's going on in there, but there's definitely tons of stuff that'll happen under the table. But I do know a lot of these governments, they do try to stop it. But there's a lot of organized crime for sure. Yeah.
Do you know, it's a little off topic, but do you know what Burma's involvement in World War II was? I mean, how significant of a role did they play for that to be kind of the defining moment of when everything went to shit?
Mm-hmm. So the British at the time obviously occupied Burma. It was a colony of theirs. And so really the key reason why Burma was fought over so hard during World War II, and a lot of people don't know about this stuff. I've read up a bunch on it. It's very fascinating. So the reason Burma was fought over was because they were trying to win the war in China. So while the war in China was happening between the Japanese and Chiang Kai-shek, and then also the communists, while all that was going on, the only way for the Americans and for the British to get supplies and support into China, so that way China wouldn't fall, was basically overland. They had to go through the mountains. They had to go through Burma, and the closest port is in southern Burma. And then also to get stuff from India, you need to get stuff from India. So they built what's called the Burma Road. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, but they built these roads to get supplies into China. So then what the Japanese did was they went down through Thailand. At the time, I believe it was called Siam, and then they invaded into Burma and fought the British there and pushed the British completely out of Burma. The Japanese completely occupied it and pushed all the British back into India. And so then once the British and Americans sort of stopped retreating and got themselves situated, eventually in 1943, 1944, and 45, they started pushing, the Allies started pushing offensives back into Burma. But it was very different. So it was very, very thick jungle, lots of mountains. And so two things were going on. One, the American military and British military, the Air Force in particular, they were flying supplies in aircraft over the Himalayas and dropping the supplies in China. That's how they were keeping the Chinese military from completely collapsing to the Japanese. And then they started doing these sort of long-range infiltration patrols where they would take several hundred guys. So the Allies would take several hundred guys, the British would do this, the Americans would do it, and you take several hundred guys and you either you drop them deep into Burma, or you have them basically literally cut a path with knives and cut your way, and machetes, and cut your way through the jungle to attack the Japanese. And the only way that they could be resupplied was through the air. And so they also started using new tactics, so I learned this as well. So the first time American forces used aircraft as a designated close air support for troops in contact was actually in Burma during World War II. So in the other theaters, what would happen is the soldiers would typically call, maybe like the Marines fighting on the island campaigns, they would call in for naval bombardment, but they didn't have direct coordination with the aircraft. Well, in Burma, it was the first time that they had actually troops on the ground were, hey, here's friendly positions, here's enemy positions, I need a gun run, whatever, east to west, right? So it was like the first time JTAC's ever really been used was in Burma to call in these airstrikes.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, so that kind of sets the stage for how we've gotten to where we're at now. So now if you could kind of go into your initial involvement of when you first started, and then kind of how you got to where you're at now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like I said, I started going into 2018, started doing just a variety of different things, a lot of medical training, things like that. Like I said, it was just kind of me on my own, not really able to do much. But as the organization grew, and actually a huge part of that is due to you and your podcast and your audience. At the time, when I came on last time, it's like I would have volunteers and stuff, and guys would come work with us, but we just, it was just not. It was sort of a non-viable thing. It wasn't going to last forever. And so going on your podcast and your audience, they just didn't. They showed up in numbers that shocked me and brought in a ton of support and enabled us. They basically gave us the injection that kept us alive to grow into what we are. So I seriously want to thank your audience and you as well for having me on and everything. So that made a huge difference for us.
Yeah, well, that's all the listeners of the show. So thank you guys. You guys make a difference in so many ways. Mm-hmm. I've had a number of guests on that, it's been a transformative experience. And to me, there's no higher honor than to be able to connect that dot. So thank you to the listeners.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so basically what we started doing at that point, we started growing and getting to the point where we were able to go in and help more and more. So long story short, what we've started doing is now that we have the resources, now that we have, I've got, several guys on full-time staff, and we're able to go in and do, go in and set up permanent operations and things like that. Over the last basically 6 months or so, this mission, I actually just got back from 4 months in Burma on my own and with a couple of guys on the team. And so what we've been doing is we've been setting up an ambulance service, a jungle ambulance service. So the reason this got started was I got out there in November, and I was in Burma. We were driving around in one of our trucks, and it was in the evening time, and somebody came out to our truck and stopped us. They said, "Stop, stop, stop." One of the villagers came out, and they said, "There's a pregnant lady. She's been bleeding for 12 hours, and there was a medic there." And they said, "Can we transport this lady in your truck. Can you take her to the clinic? So there's a jungle clinic run by another organization. They do amazing work. They right now are keeping things a little bit covert just for some political reasons or security reasons, but they do incredible work. And they're doing highly complicated surgeries in the middle of the jungle in a tent. Wow. Like, true story. So it's unbelievable the work that they do. Anyway, but this is the only medical care that's available in the particular place where we work in Burma. And so we said, yeah, well, absolutely, we'll bring this lady to the clinic. And so it was about a 3-hour ride through very, very mountainous, jungly roads. You know, it's impossible for her to get there. It's just not going to happen if we weren't there to take her. So we take her and we drop her off. And at the time, so my interpreter and like one of my best friends in this world, Babo, and I'll talk more about him later because he unfortunately passed away a couple of months ago during a mission. So he and I started talking on this drive, and I was like, what's the deal here? I was like, we hadn't really thought about it. I was like, there's no way for people to get to this clinic, is there? And he said, no, there's no way for us to do that. And I said, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to fix this. We're going to fix this problem. And so the other guys in the team, they were already planning on coming in to do just a whole bunch of basically TCCC medical training, because there's bombs constantly falling out of the sky. There's landmines everywhere. So we're just, hey, anybody and everybody, here's a tourniquet, here's how to use it. And just doing a ton of training. And I said, well, let's do something a lot more organized. Let's do something where we can really take care of these critical patients and get them out. And so I called the guys and I said, hey, we're going to set up an ambulance service. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, we're going to figure it out. And so over the next few months, a couple of the guys, basically their entire job was to we got basically 4-wheel drive trucks out there, and our guys got, I mean, I don't know how they pulled it off, but they did like all the work. They got oxygen tanks and IVs and just all kinds of like advanced life support stuff, and they have it rigged up in these off-road trucks that can transport several patients. And we had them staffed by people from Burma who are medically trained. They're able to ride in the back of the ambulance and take care of these patients and whatnot. And so we set that up over the course of several months. But so anyway, we drive this lady to this clinic. It takes us hours. We get her there, and then I don't hear anything about her. A month later, I was visiting that clinic to visit some wounded freedom fighters, and I was talking with them. And as I was leaving, somebody came up to us and they said, hey, there's a lady here who just had a baby. She needs a ride back to her village. Can you take her at least some of the way? And it was the same lady.
Oh, wow.
And so she had not only survived, her baby was doing good, and they had I think they had to do some sort of emergency surgery. I don't know exactly what they had to do, but they did some sort of emergency surgery, and she also had no way to get back to her village. And so we got her back to her village, I think the day before Christmas Eve, as we got her back. And so it was this really cool moment where I realized, like, okay, this is a very important thing. But then that also got me thinking, you have the freedom fighters, you have the civilians who are down in even more and more remote areas where they're getting attacked and shot by the Burma army, and there's mortars and stuff going off all the time. And that's what our mission is there to do. That's what our mission is. We're there to help the civilians who are caught in the crossfire. And so I thought, well, how can we help these people? And I'll get into that in a second. But that really got me understanding the importance of this ambulance service. And then a couple of guys on the team, specifically, Jason and Adam, again, these dudes, they went in for several months living in the jungle and got all of this set up. And I think at this point we've been running it officially for, I don't know, 6 weeks, 7 weeks at this point. And we have to have transported 150, 200 patients already. Damn. It's insane, because it's the only way for these people to get medical care.
One thing in hearing the kind of the atrocities, it made me think, or I guess want to ask, what is the primary financial method of support for the Burmese government? Is it drug running essentially, or are they? I mean, because if they've got a fucking Air Force and the means to equip, a military force that size to be able to enact that level of atrocity for that length of time, that's no small task. Looking at it from we're helping here, but another way to combat that problem is from a root cause standpoint. If you have an ability to kind of capsize their ability to fund themselves, that certainly would help too. Do you know, A, how that happens, and B, is there any involvement from anywhere that's trying to get in the middle of that?
So 2 things on that. One is that the Burma Army, they are getting their funding for multiple things. So they've got drugs that they're selling. They've got other just random businesses, probably selling a lot of rice, selling a lot of things like that. But then also power. So there's a big hydroelectric dam, for example, because there's so many rivers, there's so much water that flows through there. They're able to export power to other neighboring countries and such. And so it's difficult to know exactly where their money comes from, but they also control the mines, they control everything. So the military controls everything, and all profit goes into the hands and the pockets of the generals, but then they invest all of that back into the military. So it's this strange thing where it is so expensive to run the military, but also everyone's extremely poor. It's total abject poverty because every dime goes into buying extra MiGs from Russia.
Okay. All right. So you set up the ambulance service, which is awesome, but then you also kind of come to terms with wanting to help the civilian population. Where did you go from there, and how did that pan out?
So what I realized I needed to do, so let me back up 1 second. In the world of humanitarian work, what often happens is people show up wanting to help. You show up and you say, hey, I deliver water bottles, right? So you want to show up and you want to deliver all the water bottles that you can, because that's what you do and that's what you know how to do and you're good at it and it's great. What happens, or let's say you dig wells or something, right? Well, what happens is a lot of times organizations will show up, and us too, so I have to be careful about how we operate. A lot of times an organization will show up and have the tendency to want to help in a specific way because we think we understand the situation, but in reality, you don't have a clue what's going on. And so oftentimes the way that you want to help may help, but it's probably not the best way to help, right? So the jungle ambulance thing, I never had that idea. I just saw it was an issue, and then all of a sudden now we've transported just, probably hundreds of people at this point. It's crazy. So I wanted to figure out the best way to help the civilian population. And so I said, I need to go see everything. And so what ended up happening was I ended up going for basically a month, we'll say behind enemy lines, traveling just by myself with my interpreter, Babo. And we traveled through this entire tribal area to see everything. I wanted to see everything. I was like, where's the bad guys? Where's the good guys? Where are the civilians? Where are the bombs dropping? What are the roads? What are the rivers? And it's again, you have to walk everywhere. So you can't just, it's not just a quick drive, quick loop. You have to go see, you have to go physically see everything. And also communication is so terrible. You can't just sit there and ask somebody. You have to physically go see it yourself.
Do you know what the size of Burma is in relation to the United States, ballpark?
I have no idea. Maybe it's the size of Texas, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, it's not huge. And so we're traveling around this area and walking around for an entire month. And I started to see, okay, here's ways that, here's safe corridors and stuff that you can use to get civilians out. One of the big things that we noticed as well that we need was radios. So we've purchased like hundreds of radios at this point and solar panels and stuff to set them up in villages and set them up in areas where Burma Army soldiers will come out of their bases and then they'll attack the people or random things will happen. And this allows the civilians to coordinate and know which mountain to run to, which direction do we go? Because oftentimes people won't know where to go and they'll run right into the bad guys. And that's how a lot of these atrocities end up happening. So that's one of the big ways that we're able to help and do all that. The second thing is, as I was out there looking at all this stuff, how can we help the medical situation? So there's like zero medical care. So people are getting shot, people are getting hit with mortars all the time because the Burma Army just shoots mortars like crazy. And so all these casualties, but they have nowhere to go and they have no way everyone's dying before they even have a chance to get to the hospital. So how do we put more infrastructure in there? How do we build more roads? How do we get ambulances in? And how do we do it in a safe way? Because it's a very dynamic combat environment where anyway, I went in for like a month and just did nothing but just gathered information. I went and looked at all the bad guy positions, all the good guy positions, all that stuff.
Any close calls there?
Yes. So during that time, Actually, one story. It's actually kind of funny. So we were doing reconnaissance on a bad guy base. So they basically work out of fobs. So a little compound, a little base is typically how they'll have maybe 20, 30 guys in there, and that's where they stay, and then they operate out of there. And so we were looking at one of these particular locations because it was close to an abandoned village where 90% of the villagers had left because bombs and stuff constantly fall in the village. And so I was there with some of the resistance guys, and they were showing me this. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm here to set up medical stuff. But they're like, oh, we want you to see, we want you to see. So we ended up crawling within about 200 yards of this bad guy position, and there's nothing between us and them. There's just a river and some rice fields, and then the bad guys are right there, and we're like hiding behind a couple of trees out in the middle of a rice field. And so I'm like, okay, cool, this is great. Just looking at this camp. Well, of course, as we're sitting there, a huge gunfight erupts, not between us and the Burma army, but between the Burma army and like another group of guys who decided to attack the base. And so we're sitting there, and there's mortars and machine gun fire and stuff crossing this river, and there's all this gunfire going back and forth, and we're just sitting there. And I'm going, okay, we can't move around now because now the bad guys are looking. They're looking for someone to shoot. So we're just laying there. Well, and we're very, very close. And so we're sitting there. So I look over at my interpreter, Babo, and all of a sudden he just panics. He panics, and he's very like, this guy's like cool as a cucumber. He's just chilling. And he panics and like starts screaming, snake, snake, snake. And he crawls back. And I'm like, I was like, honestly, I was like, wasn't even worried about the snake. I was like, dude, you're going to get shot. Like, what is going on? You're going to give away our position. And well, sure enough, a poisonous snake, a baby poisonous snake had crawled right into our position and was like maybe a foot away from his face.
Jesus.
As we're laying there.
What snake was it? Do you know?
I don't know, but it was brown. Yeah, it was brown and creepy. And so one of the guys who was with us, he had like a machete, and he just hacked this thing to death. And then everybody just crawled back into position and just acted like nothing had happened.
Wow.
And so it was like one of those moments where I'm sitting there, I'm going like, what is my life? I'm sitting here. There's like this big gunfight going on. I'm not involved in it, but I'm sitting here. There's a dead snake. All these red ants are like immediately eating this carcass. And I'm just laying here. I'm just going like, what has my life become? So it's just one of those funny, surreal moments. But yeah, that was definitely a close call where things could have gone squirrely.
How many guys were with you at that time?
I think there was like maybe 3 or 4 of us. Yeah.
Is the Burmese python a significant snake there? Did you see any? Are there a lot of them? Is it a threat wildlife wise?
So I saw snakes on 2 other occasions on that recon trip as well. One, I was walking up a trail, and there was just a big black snake. I don't know, probably 4 or 5 feet long, right there on the side of the trail, and he just scurried away from me. Another time, we were getting mortared, and so we're laying on the ground, and there's mortars and stuff coming in, and then I just see the snake. It wasn't a black snake; it was like brown and black, but it like scurried like right over toward us, and then saw us and scurried off a different direction. But I don't know like how many people are killed by snakes or anything like that.
Is the wildlife there a significant enough threat to where you guys prepare for in case of type stuff with that? I mean, like, do you carry a kind of a go bag, E&E kit, med kit that's always on your person to?
Yeah, absolutely.
To deal with stuff specific to wildlife there? Because, I mean, it's a fucking jungle, right?
Not specific to wildlife, because there's so many different kinds of snakes. What kind of anti-venom do you carry? You can't even carry it, right? Because you have to keep it refrigerated. So as far as specific to wildlife, no. But yeah, you always have an E&E kit on you at all times, and medical kit.
Can you talk about what's in the kits?
It's a pretty basic T-CCC kit, honestly, is really what you need. Yeah, and then everything else you can kind of improvise. Yeah.
I want to take a second to talk about something near and dear to my heart, and that is a staunch supporter of this podcast, which is Bub's Naturals. The hat sitting in front of me here on our coffee table here in the studio belonged to Glenn Doherty. His nickname was Bub. I did 2 platoons with him, and his childhood best friend and another colleague of theirs, Sean is the best friend, TJ is their colleague, started Bub's Naturals, which is a collagen and MCT oil company in Bub's or Glenn's honor. And for me, it's an absolute honor to be sponsored by and working with a company that was started in the honor of one of my closest friends and a guy that I went to war with. And the Bub's brand is not only super quality collagen powder as well as MCT oil powder. But they also give back to the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. They donate proceeds from their product sales to the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation, which, to me just furthers, the mission set on Veterans Day. They give 100% back. So I do believe it's the best collagen on the planet. I like to mix it in with morning coffee. The MCT oil powder, the same thing. It mixes in very easy. It tastes great, and it just kind of adds everything that you want to start your day off from a brain health standpoint, from joint support, gut support. MCT oil and collagen are two components, especially as we age, that are integral components to health. And so to be able to work with Bubs Naturals and be able to work with them and sponsor a product that number one is a high quality product, and number two is so near and dear to my heart and to the Mic Drop podcast for who it was started for and what it stands for. It's just it's an amazing place to be. So it is Whole30 approved. It's sports certified, so you're not going to run into any problems with that. And I will say that right now they're offering 20% off if you go to bubsnaturals.com and use the Mic Drop code. So I really highly encourage you to try it out, incorporate it into your day-to-day for joint health, for brain health, for cognition, for gut health, and to support an amazing organization that does a lot of things in Glenn Bubs' honor. So go to bubsnaturals.com. Mic Drop is the code, 20% off. All right, so you're in the middle of this kind of reconnaissance trip throughout the country. You get into the Snake Gunfight, we'll call it, and then what happened after that?
So we continued to do this. We continued to do this reconnaissance, and I was in communication with the guys, and they were getting this jungle ambulance service set up, and I was like, okay, this is perfect. It's going really, really good. But then, unfortunately, disaster struck, and things were going fine. But then we had a really bad day, and my interpreter Babo ended up getting killed. And I'll tell you what happened there. So, so like I said, this guy's one of my best friends in the entire world, and we had spent so much time together. He'd always been my interpreter going into Burma. And so on one particular day, we were with a larger group of the freedom fighters, and they told me, they were like, hey, we're going to do this attack. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll provide medical support. Because and when I say attack, the bad guys were behind enemy lines. The bad guys were in this particular position, and so these villages were abandoned, and they wanted to get rid of the bad guys, right? Because these bad guys were firing mortars into the villages and, again, raping and murdering everybody, and it's awful. So I said, okay, I'll provide medical support. So I went and I was with their medic. And so then I had to be vague on some of the details here because it was a pretty major thing that they did at the time. But anyway, so this massive battle erupts. There's mortars and machine gun fire and bombs going off everywhere, and there's just it's total carnage and mayhem. And during that time, one of the guys who we were working with had been shot through the knee. And I wasn't with him at the time when that happened, so I wasn't able to treat him at that moment. But so this big, very, very chaotic battle happens, and we have to pull back. Ultimately, our guys are not really successful in their objective. And so it's about 2 hours later, and I come across the one guy who had been wounded, he'd been shot through the knee. So I go and check him. And so he actually had two medics with him at that point, two of the local trained medics. And so I went and looked at this guy, but he'd been shot in the leg, and I thought, I was like, but his face was super pale. And I was like, this guy looks like he's about to die. He looks like he's about to go into shock. He's losing a ton of blood. So, and I go and I look at his injury. Well, the medics hadn't actually cut his pants open to look at the injury. They hadn't even physically looked at it. And also they had put two tourniquets on, but they had basically used bandanas and sticks to try to make as tourniquets, and they put that on over his pants. And so I opened up this guy's leg with my trauma shears, and there's, man, I don't even know, there's like there's like 1.5 liters of blood just sitting there, and he's actually on a stretcher that Stronghold had provided. I'd brought like a rolled up combat litter, like a Skedco, and so he's on that, and so there's this huge pool of blood that just comes gushing out of his pants, and I look at his injury, and I can see there's bone fragments hanging out of the exit injury. And I'm watching the blood physically like come out of the injury. It's like oozing out. It's like a faucet that's just turned on very lightly. And he's been bleeding like this for at least 2 hours at this point.
Fuck.
Because there's still sort of sporadic fighting going on, but it's not like as heavy as it was before. So he's been bleeding out like this for 2 hours for a very simple injury. So I immediately pull out my tourniquet, put it on the guy, ratchet it down, and I watch the blood just stop flowing, and I was like, okay, you're good, you're all solid. And so then the medics took him and they evacuated him. And his story is important, very important, because it'll come up later. So this simple tourniquet and simple training that I have was able to save this guy's life. So that's why I was saying that the training and stuff that Stronghold is doing is so vitally important, because you have actual medics who aren't able to save this guy's life just because you didn't expose the injury, you didn't actually look at it, you didn't actually stop the bleeding. And so this guy 100% would have died had I not been there. And so that's why the training and providing them proper supplies, like just tourniquets and things, is so important. And there's so many injuries and so many people die from this stuff. So anyway, that guy leaves, he gets evacuated, and there's still a little bit of fighting, and but nothing super crazy at the moment. And so at the time, I actually had 2 interpreters with me. We had a new interpreter, and I was trying to get to know him more. That's why I brought him along during this particular portion of the trip. And so I was in one of the villages talking with him, and we were talking with some of the guys and just sort of discussing this fighting that was going on and like what they were going to do next and whatnot. Well, my main interpreter, Babo, he went with some of the resistance guys, and they were going to go blow something up, and he wanted to go watch and take a picture of it, right? Because there's going to be this big explosion, and so they were going to go blow up a small bridge, and that's the bridge that the bad guys use to transport all their trucks and all their resources and stuff in there to cause all their mayhem. So he wanted to go watch this and take a video of it. Well, a few minutes later, after he left, this huge explosion goes off, the bridge is blown up. And then within 10 seconds, I hear on the radios, the local language, and they're saying his name. And I knew immediately at that point something bad had happened. And so, sure enough, my other interpreter came up to me and said, "Hey, Babo's injured, and it's really, really bad." And at that time, there were no more medics, because the medics had been treating this other wounded guy and had evacuated him. So, keep in mind, like, this is, again, I know I say this a bunch of times, but Babo is like one of my best friends in the world. He's like one of the most loyal, like the most loyal person you'll ever meet. He and I have been through hell and back together. We spent years together working in Burma. And so at this moment, I'm trying not to, like, I'm literally trying not to break down and cry, because I just know, I know this is bad. I know this isn't going to end well. And so it took us about 30 or 40 minutes. I was the only medic, and I'm not a medic. I was just basic TCCC qualified. And so it took us a while to get out to him. Eventually we found him. And when I came up to him, he was on the ground. Someone had sort of bandaged his head up a little bit, but basically a portion of his brain was hanging out of his head. He was still alive, unconscious, and he was covered in blood and vomit. And he was, and I looked down and I looked, and they had taken like off his overshirt, because he had like a long sleeve shirt on, and under that shirt he had actually been wearing his Stronghold t-shirt. So at that point, everybody looks at me and they go like, what do we do? What do we do? And we of course have to evacuate him. And so we had a second litter there as well. So I pulled out the litter, and I just immediately started telling the interpreter, started giving everyone instructions. Hey, put him here, put him on the, get him on this stretcher, and we're going to start transporting him out of here. Now, at this point, now keep in mind, there is no medical evacuation service. There is nothing. It doesn't exist. This is why we're putting in the jungle ambulance. But our jungle ambulances are still miles and miles and miles away. It's completely impossible. There's no road even for our ambulances to get to us. The ambulances actually don't even exist yet. They're still in preparation. So you have this critically injured patient, and I'm not a medic, but I have to deal with it, and we have to get him out of there. So we get him onto a litter. We load him into the back of a truck. A local villager came and put their truck in there. And so I told a couple of guys who were with me, who were like my assistants, I said, he's going to vomit. He's going to continue to vomit. And so when he does that, we need to tip him on his side. And I gave a guy a pair of gloves, and I was like, you need to be, if he starts choking, you need to clear out his airway, because at this point I couldn't do anything for him. I had no IVs. I couldn't give him oxygen. I just have a basic med kit. So I said, all we can do is keep his airway clear.
Had he been shot in the head, or did the explosion?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that he had been hit with shrapnel from the explosion, because he just didn't have his head down far enough.
So I mean, it was essentially a kind of a blue on blue almost. I mean, it was the
it was definitely a friendly explosion. It wasn't the bad guys that hit him. But
it's fucking heartbreaking.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely awful. So we get him in this truck, and we start transporting him out of there. And sure enough, he starts to vomit, and it's really hard for me to talk about this, but I need to tell the story. So he starts to vomit. He starts to kick his leg. So he starts to violently kick his leg, but he's unconscious. And so I'm thinking he's having some sort of neurotic, not neurotic, but I don't know, some sort of neurological. Thank you. Some sort of neurological response. So he starts kicking his leg, and then after he starts kicking his leg, then he starts to vomit. So we tip him on his side, clear his airway. And this happens multiple times when we're in the back of this truck. We get him, we travel maybe, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, and then that's the end of the road. And then we have to carry him. There's another like 5 or 6 miles we have to carry him to get him to the next road, basically. And so there's myself and like 3 or 4 other guys. And so I'm thinking, oh man, we're gonna have to carry him for 5 or 6 miles. This is gonna take forever, but you know, whatever, we'll drag him, we'll make it happen. We got a Skedco, we're good to go. But when the road ended, waiting at the end of the road were 26 men from the local village who had heard that he was injured, and they were there to volunteer their time to come and help carry him.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the tribe that were there to help and that we're there to work with. And so 26 of these guys show up, and they refused to let me carry. They refused to let me carry. I would grab the litter, and they would like almost like fight me, like, no, dude, we got this. And so for the next 5 or 6 miles, they wouldn't let me or my other guys who were with me help carry, and they just insisted. And so they just, every couple minutes, they would shift, and they would take turns carrying, and they'd hand carry. Anyway, so we get across. It's while this is going on, it takes the total evacuation process took like probably 6 hours or so with this critically injured patient, and we're carrying him through the heat of the day. It's Burma. It's hot, and you know, there's no wind. We're just getting baked out there. And so we eventually get him. And of course, every few minutes he would kick his leg. He would kick his leg, and then he would vomit, and he would kick his leg, and he would vomit. And so this happened over and over again. So we eventually got him to a road where we could wait for another truck to come and take us deeper into the jungle, where we could get him to a medic. And they asked me, they said, do you want to wait here for the truck, or do you want to keep walking? And I was like, no, we keep walking. We're going to cut as much time as possible. I know there's like a 99% chance he's going to die, but I was like, but for that 1% chance, I was like, no, we're going to keep working. We're going to do everything we possibly can to keep him alive. And so we kept walking along this road. Eventually a truck came and met us, and then we went into the jungle. So when we went into the jungle, deeper into the jungle, there was myself and a sort of a higher level medic, maybe like EMT level paramedic kind of guy. And so we go deeper into the jungle, and it's just myself and 2 or 3 other guys in the back of this truck. And I'm absolutely just emotionally like destroyed. I just can't even believe what's happening. And so he keeps on kicking, and I'm like, why? Like, he keeps on kicking, and then he would vomit and stuff. And eventually he just started kicking a bunch, but wouldn't vomit. I think he'd vomited everything that he had. And so there's nothing I could do to treat him. And so what I did was, as he's kicking, I would rub his leg. That's all I could do, was I would rub his leg and be like, hey man, it's okay. And so I did that. So normally when he would kick like 5 or 6 times, like very, very violently. and he would try to reach up with his right arm and try to pull the bandages off of his head. And so anyway, I rubbed his leg, and when I rubbed his leg, after he only kicked once or twice, he stopped. And I thought, that's strange. And so then a couple minutes later, he starts to kick his leg, and he'd only kick it like once, and I would rub his leg, and then he would stop. And so I don't know for sure, but I think he still had a certain level of consciousness and knew what was going on. He could certainly feel me touching his leg. I don't know if he could hear us. He definitely couldn't see us. His eyes were closed and everything. But I think the violent kicking and stuff that he was doing was because he felt trapped. He was paralyzed and trapped and in pain, and we had nothing to give him. And, you know, he was basically suffering. And I think that's why he was kicking his leg before he would vomit, because he knew he was going to vomit, and he was trying to tell us that he was going to vomit. So we get him deep into the jungle. The sun is now about to set, or the sun is now setting. It's dark out there, and we get him to a real medic, one of the local medics who knew what he was doing. He put a pulse oximeter on him, and his O2 sats were so low that it didn't even register. And so I asked the medic, I was like, what are the chances that he survives the night? And the medic said, 20%, maybe. And so at that point, I knew he was going to die. And so, you know, this guy I've worked with for years, and he's my best friend, and he's done, you know, we've done so much together. I know his family and everything. Basically, I just held his feet, and I just started weeping uncontrollably. And all I could say was, you know, I'm sorry, my friend. That's all I could say.
Yeah.
And goodbye. And so we had to leave him, and keep in mind, there's still fighting going on. They have no medics. And at this point I'm like, well, all right, I'm the medic now, so I'm going to go back. And so we had to leave him there. And he, you know, that was the last time I saw him alive. And so then we had to repeat the entire trip back. But now it's after dark, so it's another 4, 5, 6 hours to get back to where the fighting is going on. I get back out there. Luckily, no one else has been injured at this point. It's very, very late at night, and we're in this abandoned village, and I maybe get a couple hours of sleep, you know, if that. I wake up the next morning to a message that through their, you know, radio channels or whatever. Basically, as soon as I woke up, they told me that he had passed away about 20 minutes before I woke up. And so I started telling people who needed to know. I needed to make sure his wife knew what was going on, and I needed to make sure that just a few other like key leaders, like some of the civilian leadership, needed to know what was going on, because he wasn't just an interpreter. He was a very very well connected sort of individual who did a lot of really, really important things. So I was letting different people know.
How are you communicating with them? Sat phone or local?
There's different ways of communicating. Sometimes it's radios, sometimes it's sat phone, sometimes I'll just borrow somebody's phone if there's cell phone signal. I'll just like borrow their phone and pass messages through that using VPNs and different stuff like that. So you got to get creative with it for sure.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm messaging different people and letting them know what's going on. And as I'm saying these messages, I hear this noise. And I'm like, I was like, that sounds like a mortar being fired. But at this point, it's completely peaceful. It's completely calm. Nothing's going on. And I stand there, and I count to 60. Before I get to 60, boom, this explosion goes off, and then doom, 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 more mortars, boom, boom, boom. And so the village we were in just started getting bombarded by the Burma army. And we knew immediately, okay, the Burma army, they're counterattacking because of the fighting that the guys had done the day before. And so I'm in like shorts and a t-shirt. I run to my building. I throw my clothes on. I get all my gear packed up. And there's 40 millimeter and mortars and stuff just coming in, just decimating this place. I'm literally like laying on the ground, tying my shoes on my side, because I don't want to be up, because there's so much shrapnel and metal and stuff flying around everywhere. And so we get our packs ready, and there's a whole bunch of gunfire erupts. Sure enough, the Burma army, they had a bunch of guys come in, and they were trying to clear out the village. And so now I'm experiencing what these civilians feel. I'm experiencing what these civilians go through all the time. And these mortars are dropping. There's machine gun fire and rifle fire going everywhere. And some of the guys that were, on the front line, I got a message that one of the guys I had been next to the day prior during the fighting, one of the guys had been in like the little medical squad. I got a picture, and he had been shot through the head and had been killed. And another guy had been shot in the shoulder. And so basically we're getting overrun. We have no way to hold these guys off, right? It's not quite asymmetrical warfare, but it's kind of close. Like the bad guys are, like the Burma army is definitely stronger when they do frontal assaults like this. And so we're falling back, buildings are blowing up, rifle fires going through everything, and eventually we have to abandon the village, basically. So we abandon the village and we pull out of there, and ultimately no one else was killed except for the one guy right at the beginning. And the local defender guys got creative and were able to stop the bad guys. But one of the important things about this village, which I did not mention until now, this village is the same village that Babo, my interpreter, had been born in.
Oh, wow.
And he was an orphan, and he grew up in this village. And he had only, because of the war, he had only been back to that village one time in 33 years. And so the time that we were there, again, providing this medical support, this was only the second time he'd been back in 33 years.
Yeah.
And so this is his family members were coming up to us and were coming up and talking to him, and aunts and uncles and cousins, stuff he hadn't seen in forever, nieces and nephews, people he hadn't seen in forever. And they were coming up to him in the days leading up to his death, and we're talking with him, and we're so happy to see him. And they saw that there was a white guy, so they were like bringing me fruit and stuff. They were just like the sweetest people. I would just like show up, and there's like a pile of grapes, and I'm like, that's awesome. I like, whose grapes are these? And they're like, oh, they're for you. Like the villagers brought them for you. So these people are just so sweet and took incredibly good care of me. But this is their village that's getting overrun. This is his village. So it was a very, in a way, I got to experience what these civilians go through. And so we have to abandon the village, and we're worried it's going to get completely overrun. And the village defender guys, they got creative and used some explosives or something or other and stopped the bad guys in their tracks, which was really, really great. So ultimately the bad guys couldn't hold the village, and they had to leave. So right after this, I then had to repeat that entire thing I had done twice the day before, that entire route I had done the day before. I now had to repeat it, and I basically spent, myself and my interpreter, we spent the next 18 hours traveling out of the area. The medics had come back, so we had to get back for the funeral and talk with the village leader, or talk with the tribal leaders and all that. So we spent 18 hours hiking and walking and traveling through the mountains, through the day, through the night, and to get back to his village for his funeral. And so after that happened, we continued to set up the ambulance service. And of course, the other guys on the team, they knew Babo very, very well as well. They had traveled with him, and he'd always been our interpreter. So then a few weeks later, we finally have the ambulance service ready to go. Now, keep in mind, now this ambulance service means so much more to us, because I was just thinking, I don't know if Babo could have survived his injuries. I don't know if it's possible or not. But I just thought, man, it took forever to get him any kind of medical care. From the time he was injured to the time he was even seen by a real medic, 8 or 9 hours.
What shoes were you wearing?
What shoes was I wearing? I was wearing some Keens, Keen boots. Yeah. My feet were held up great. Yeah.
All right. So you get the ambulance service put in place, and was that your last experience there? Like, once you set that up, did you rotate back home, or was there more?
No. So we kept going. So remember the guy I told you about who we put the tourniquet on? So now it's like 3 weeks later. We're now ready to do the ambulance service. Well, at the clinic, I got word that they had brought in a guy who had been wounded and had been shot in the knee. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder who that is. And so I went down to the clinic to see this guy, and it turns out it was the same guy who'd been shot in the knee 3 weeks earlier and had been evacuated through that same route, but he had not been able to get medical care, and the bad guy, the Burma army, had sort of cut off a lot of the roads, and so he had never even been able to make it to that clinic. So for 3 weeks, this guy has had basically a knee that's completely blown out. And so long story short, he ended up being the first patient that we transported with our ambulance service to get him out of there. And so we had to transport him about 5 hours to hand him off to, I think, like Red Cross or something like that.
Damn.
Yeah, in the truck. Yeah.
That's incredible. As far as the trucks go, I mean, you're deep in the jungle. How do you get fuel in there?
So there's different ways. So ironically, you can actually buy it in Burma. So the locals know how to do all this stuff, right? So what we do is we say, hey, here's how much does it cost for a fuel barrel? It's like, okay, X amount of money. All right, here you go buy the fuel, and they have their little networks of people, and they find like life continues on even in these war zones, and so a lot of the stuff is just purchased there in Burma.
Are you using their currency?
Yes. We use several different currencies. I can't go into that, but we use several different currencies. Yeah, but basically whatever's legal in the area.
Can you say if any of them are digital or not?
No, none of them are digital. I actually spoke with a good buddy of mine who's a team guy. He actually is working on in the digital currency world, and we had spoken about that. I think there is a huge potential for digital currency to be able to help in these kinds of situations. The problem is the digital currencies aren't all liquid, right? You can't actually get cash in a lot of different places yet, but eventually, yeah.
So speaking of morning routine and really throughout the day, health and fitness and overall well-being is something that I focus on as I get older. I get more and more kind of in tune with what works and what doesn't. And I recently started working with ketone-iq, which is hvmn.com. This product is a really, really good way to start the day, as well as basically just anytime you need a boost from an energy standpoint, you're getting ready to do something physically demanding, mentally demanding. Before I record, I take a shot. First thing in the morning I do before workouts to recover after workouts. I take it multiple times a day. And there's no sugar, it's vegan, there's no caffeine, there's no salt, gluten, no artificial flavors or sweeteners. And it works from a ketogenic standpoint, giving your brain and body the fuel that it needs to do tasking tasks. So, it's a phenomenal product, an amazing company. That's hvmn.com. And the code is mic drop, all one word, all caps, for 20% off. I can't recommend this product enough for, again, getting going in the morning, pre-workout, post-workout. You're tired in the afternoon. It's a super healthy way to feed your brain and your body from that kind of glycogen replenishment standpoint that tends to crash a lot of people when they're using caffeine products or carb products, et cetera. So I love this stuff. I use it several times throughout the day, and I encourage you guys to check it out as well. It's hvmn.com, and that code is mic drop for 20% off, all caps, all one word.
Yeah.
So I want to let you finish the story for the amount of time that you were there before I ask my ignorant curiosity questions about stuff like that. Was there more to that? Like once you transported him, was that towards the end of your trip?
That was towards the end of the trip. That was sort of the icing on the cake, and we were able to get him out. But the thing is, like, the story never really ends. So just yesterday. No, the day before. So 2 days ago, the Burma Army, they sent 3 fighter jets, 3 MiG fighter jets, and they bombed a village near in the same area where we work. So the villagers, they run away, but there was an old man in the village who wasn't able to leave, and so these airstrikes come in, and he was hit. He was hit with shrapnel. This was 2 days ago, and there's no medical evacuation for him. There's nothing that they can really do. But anyway, so they carry this guy. They hand carry him out, and they have to cross this. They have to cross a lake, and they have to go down these rivers, and they have to go through all this. It takes forever, and eventually, once they get him across this lake, they can get them to the Stronghold ambulance, which is waiting for them there. And so then our guys were able to transport him, get him to this clinic. Well, then I found out yesterday that this guy ended up having heart failure. Wow. And so then that clinic had to do some sort of surgery on the guy to keep him going. And I got confirmation this morning before coming over here to film the podcast that he's still alive and he's still doing well. But the point is that he would like 100% would be dead if he didn't have the transport. And so that's why we're also trying to expand more ambulances, helping build some roads and things like that.
Yeah,
to keep it going.
That's amazing. Does he know that you saved his life?
No, and it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just curious, I guess. But so is that kind of the big push for you? Is that the renewed sense of this is our mission here? Is the ambulance thing? Is that kind of the main focus?
Yeah, so that's going to be our main focus for now. And like I said, we still do humanitarian relief, and obviously we're still doing emergency medicine and refugee protection and things like that as they come up. Yeah. We're over the next couple of months, we're actually going to be going back in, and we're going to be setting up another ambulance in another area, and also setting up basically a boat ambulance.
Oh, wow.
So that way, because what happens is these patients, they get put on a boat and to go up a river or to go across these big lakes and things. And so there's another hour or 2 hours where they're just completely exposed to the elements, don't have oxygen, don't have anything, and there's no space for the medics to be able to work on them. Yeah. So we're going to set something up like that as well.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Are there any cities in Burma that are city-like, or is it all village?
Oh yeah. There's big cities. There's Yangon and Naypyidaw and a bunch of other actual cities.
Are they in similar strife? Like, is there Iraq and Afghanistan style urban fighting going on there, or are they more left out of it?
Yeah, there is fighting now, and that's what I was saying earlier. So for a while there wasn't a ton of fighting. For most of this conflict, there hasn't been a ton of fighting in the cities because that's sort of where the Burma Army's strength is at, right? But then when they did the coup, when the Burma Army did the coup 2 years ago, that's what I was saying. The people in the cities are now rising up in revolt, and so now, yeah, the cities are war zones, and all that. Yeah,
that's amazing. Do you know where the Burma Army is getting most of their weaponry and supplies? Are they using mostly Chinese AKs and munitions from China, or do you know?
So one of the things they do, so they get their big weapons. They buy a lot of their big weapons from Russia. So like those, obviously the aircraft and stuff, those are Russian. I think they buy some stuff from China, but what's interesting about the Burma Army though is they actually make their own weapons. They have their own sort of Burma Army gun that they make, and so they take literal iron ore, dump it into a melting pot, and out pops on the other side a rifle.
Do you know what the specs are on the gun? I mean, is it a 7.62?
They have it's basically like a 5.56, but it's like I forget exactly the terminology, but it's a 5.56, but it's slightly smaller, or it's slightly bigger. The size is slightly different. So basically, it allows them, if they can use NATO rounds in their rifles, but we can't use their ammo in our rifles. So if they capture our rifles, they can use our bullets, but we can't use theirs.
That's wild. I would have thought, I guess, that they would prefer the 7.62 being in that region, just ammo being probably far easier to come by than having to make their own. But that's interesting. When you go over there, do you pack in a manner where I'm assuming that like you can carry everything that you have with you all the time, and what kind of loadout are you bringing with you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you have to travel obviously very light, and 90% of the time you're carrying everything that you own on your back. So yeah, I have a 60-liter pack, and that's everything I own. That's all my clothes. Everything is in there. And so as far as a loadout, as far as gear and stuff, yeah, I'm carrying a tent, 2 pairs of clothes, a couple pairs of skivvies. I usually will carry like 4 or 5 pairs of socks, just because you can't risk if those cannot be replaced. So you got to make sure you have good socks. And then as far as like my personal gear, I'll have a med kit, a day pack, and I'll have like a big knife, and usually the locals, they'll give me if not all the time, but usually the locals will be like, hey, here's a pistol with one magazine in it. Yeah. So yeah, because I mean, you're coming across snakes, you might get attacked by the bad guys, so that stuff does happen from time to time.
Fucking panther jumps out of nowhere.
Exactly. No, exactly.
I never know. Yeah. As far as money and creature comforts, I guess, are you bringing anything? Like, what would surprise the listener that you bring? Is there a single unnecessary item that you're just like, I'm fucking bringing it?
Oh man. The one thing that I refuse to live without is so I actually have like a little inflatable pillow. Yeah. You know, like a little inflatable camping pillow. That's my one non-negotiable. That goes with me everywhere. Yeah. Because otherwise I can't sleep without it. But other than that, no. I mean, there's no creature comforts at all.
I mean, hygiene wise, are you bringing shit to shave with, or is it a toothbrush? I mean,
yeah. So yeah, you have a little toothbrush and whatever, and you can also resupply some of those items from the villagers, right? They have toothbrushes and little packs of toothpaste and little things of soap. So yeah, you'll carry like a little travel size of everything, and then every once in a while you resupply from one of the villages.
Yeah. Money wise and phone wise, like, do you bring a wallet with all of your credentials? Do you bring like a fanny pack? Like, how do you roll that way?
So it's really funny you mentioned the fanny pack. So a couple of the other guys on the team, they carry fanny packs, and that's where they keep their passport and money and wallet and all that stuff. I don't carry a fanny pack, but I have basically a day pack that is attached to me. A satchel. Yeah, it's not a man satchel. It's actually a backpack, but a satchel would be great though. Yeah. But yeah, I carry money, passport, all that stuff.
And do you bring credit cards and shit? I mean, can you use them very many places there?
Oh no, you can't use those at all. Everything's cash. Yeah. Everything's cash currency.
Even in the cities?
Yeah, I've never been into the cities, so I'm only sort of in the countrysides. Yeah. But yeah.
And so I mean, how much money cash wise are you bringing with you when you go on these trips?
So we work it several different ways. Sometimes we'll carry in cash, but typically what we like to do is, again, because we're enabling the locals to work stuff, typically what we'll do is we'll send them grants. So they need to handle it. They need to learn how to deal with all that stuff. But typically we'll have, anywhere from, 10 to 50,000 US dollars. So that way we can do what we need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of tricky to travel with that amount of cash in some of these places, I suspect.
So that's typically as well. It's just, it doesn't make sense for us to carry it around. And so again, that's why by working with locals, we send grants to different people, and then they have the cash.
But I mean, even 10 to 50K, that's a lot of fucking money to be walking around with in a lot of places.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, are you hiding? I don't want to give up all your secrets, but I mean, are you doing the prison wallet? I mean, how are you fucking carrying it?
No, so actually one of the things I'll say though is we'll just carry it in my backpack. I'll have it in my day pack that's just with my passport and everything. Like that's all right there. One thing I will say though, and I also too, we'll split it up again amongst the guys in the team and also like our interpreters and the guys we're working with. Yeah. So I've been working there for 5 years. I have never ever once seen somebody steal, like one of the locals steal something ever. And in fact, one time several years ago, I left, keep in mind, these people make no money, right? They have no money. There's like poverty, like think of the most extreme version of poverty. And I left a big wad of cash one day in a village. It like fell out of my pocket or something. This was several years ago. And it was probably, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 US dollars worth of local currency. But we get several hours down the trail. I don't even know that it's gone. And all of a sudden somebody shows up on a motorbike. They chased us down to bring me back this money. And I counted it, and all of it was there. They didn't even take a dime. Yeah. And so we're able to, and this also goes back to our criteria of who we work with. We only work with people who we can completely trust. If you're going to steal from us, if that happens even once or twice, 1 or 2 times, it's like, dude, we're not helping you anymore because now we can't function. We have to have total trust in you and vice versa.
Yeah. Wow. As far as the food goes, I mean, when you show up, you guys are paying for your own food, but like in Burma, as an example, what are you eating day to day? And are there times where you'll go days without eating, I'm assuming? Or
I've never gone multiple days or even a day without eating. But the staple is rice, right? The rice is life out there. Like it means everything. Rice is basically as important as water and air. So every meal is rice, every single one, 100% of the time. And then usually you'll have some, like most of the time you'll have some sort of like piece of meat or something, but it's usually a piece of bony meat. It could be a goat, it could be a deer, it could be a whatever pig. And then from time to time, we'll also just purchase a pig or purchase a goat. And then like the guys who we travel around with, they'll just cut it open and cut it up and cook it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there ever times where you guys bring any rations yourself, or you just figure it out once you get there?
No, so we completely rely on the locals that we're working with. Some of the guys, they'll bring, a couple of creature comforts, maybe, some protein bars. One of our guys, Adam, he's obsessed with coffee. So he has this entire like duffel bag, just literally just filled with all kinds of coffee. And he has 2 like field coffee grinders and all this stuff. So he's like grinding his own beans and stuff out there. Yeah, it's nuts. And he keeps it all in one of the villages that we always pass through. So he always just keeps it there, and he's always refilling.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Is that pretty consistent with everywhere you've been? I mean, Ukraine and South America, everywhere where you show up and deal with food that way. Is it kind of standard procedure for you guys to operate that way?
Yeah. We're never relying on our own sort of food that we're carrying in or anything like that.
Can I get a best meal that surprised you and a worst?
Okay, I'll start with the worst meal. Worst meal. So they have this thing called like a jungle squirrel, and it is a squirrel, but it's basically just a glorified bamboo rat. But to me, it just tastes so bad. They cook it up, and the way they cook it, it's like it's awful. One of the other things that they'll do too is they'll take undigested like greens from a goat's intestines that hasn't reached the stomach yet, so it's not like petrified or putrefied or anything. And so they'll squeeze that out of the intestine and like mix it in with your rice and meat and stuff like that. So you're eating chewed up goat, whatever,
partially digested
food. So it honestly doesn't taste that bad. It's just really weird. And then the big thing that they love over there is fish paste. So they take fish, they dry them out, and then they add like water and salt, and they crush it all together, and it tastes awful, but they love it. It's called fish paste. So those are like the worst things. Best.
Sorry, not to interrupt. And that's internationally. Like, are there in Ukraine or?
Colombia? Oh no, that was specifically just Burma. The best meal I've ever had that was also in Burma, and it was they had just we bought a pig, and then they butchered it and everything. And they flame roasted this pig on a bamboo stick over a fire, and it was hands down the best meat I've ever had in my entire life. I don't know what they did or how they did it, but it was just flame roasted, just free range grass fed pig, and it was unbelievable. It was so wild. Good. Yeah,
with rice
on the side. Yeah.
Any other places that meals stuck out, good or bad?
No, Ukraine was a little interesting. One of the things I found interesting about Ukraine was that every place that you go to, specifically in like Odessa, every place you go to serves sushi. So we were at an Italian restaurant with some of the Ukrainian guys, and like everybody ordered sushi, which was very interesting. But I got to try like authentic borscht, made by one of the guys' moms. She brought in a bunch of like.
How was it?
It was fantastic. It was delicious. Yeah, it was something I'd never really tried before. Yeah.
Water purification wise, I mean, are you bringing shit to always make sure that whatever you're drinking is sound?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll use is I just use a UV light Steri-Pen, and I've never gotten sick from the water. Just using the UV Steri-Light pen.
Wow, that says a lot about that. I've used the Camelback ones that have the UV light in the cap.
Oh, really?
So it's like a regular Nalgene bottle.
Yeah.
Made by Camelback, and in the cap, it's got the entire fucking mechanism. It's got the light, the capacitor, the fucking a battery, everything, and you recharge that, and one charge lasts like, I want to say, a number of treatments. It may even be dozens. And there's a filter that has to be replaced every so often or whatever, but that thing works fucking awesome.
That's amazing. I've never even heard of that.
Yeah.
I might have to check that out.
I've never been overseas with it. I've used it at, national parks and national forests and shit here just to be on the safe side. But in terms of souvenirs or anything that you can speak of from any places, like is there anything that you've snagged that's fucking cool that people would gawk at?
I don't know if people would gawk at it. I have snagged a few items. The only thing that I got one item in Ukraine. So when I was in Ukraine, I spent a lot of my trip there alone, just because of the way the logistics worked out. And so I made friends with these little Ukrainian kids. They were staying in a community shelter, and the pastor of this shelter, him and I became pretty good friends. Well, as I was leaving, they brought me a Ukrainian flag, and there was like maybe 3 or 4 little kids that I'd become friends with, and they all stood there and sang the Ukrainian national anthem and presented me with this flag, and I'm just sitting there like trying not to cry. So that to me is a very special thing to me. It's just a normal Ukrainian flag if you look at it, but it means a lot to me.
Yeah.
on this last trip in, though, I took several souvenirs. So at the beginning, I had spoken about the one particular incident, the Snake Gunfight thing, as that battle was going on. As we were leaving that day, you could see where the villagers, you could see the footprints of where the villagers en masse had left, I don't know, a week or 2 or 3 weeks, I don't know. But they had left that area en masse, and you could see the sort of the trail where they had gone. And in that trail was a little, little red sandal. It was just a child's sandal, like it just maybe 3 or 4 inches long, just this tiny little thing, you know, way smaller than my hand. And I picked that up, and it's still covered in dirt. I still have that, because that reminds me of why we're doing what we're doing, and the people that we're trying to help. Because, you know, it's easy to lose focus sometimes when there's just, you know, things are blowing up and there's action and there's things going on, and it's hard to sort of symbolize like what's going on over there. But this abandoned child's sandal, flip-flop, is one of the things I brought with me. And then also I took 2 other souvenirs from Burma on this one. One was a license plate from a blown up Burma Army truck, which I thought was just great. I was like, this is great. I'm taking this license plate. So it's got like shrapnel holes and stuff in it. And then another one is actually it's the back end of a mortar the Burma Army had fired into the same village where Babo was killed, and the same village where he had been born and raised, and all that. And that mortar, we found just the tail end of it, basically, and I have that as well to remind me of why we're doing what we're doing. So the child slipper and then the mortar.
That's a neat contrast that you could shadow box that probably and make something pretty cool with that.
Yeah.
Of all the time that you've spent with Stronghold from day one until as you're sitting here, is there one thing that stands out in terms of being the most out of place thing that you've ever seen?
The most out of place thing I've ever seen. Man, that's a tough question, because so my life is so bizarre. I see bizarre things on a daily basis, and so things don't even when crazy things happen, it's just like, oh yeah, you expect things to be completely crazy. I'm trying to think of something specifically like totally out of place. No, I will say some of the characters that you come across. So what I've noticed in this realm of like humanitarian work in conflict zones, it attracts like the absolute best of humanity. Is like some of the guys on our team, these are like the best human beings that you would ever meet. So think of like your best buddies from the teams, right? That's who these guys are. Just super high quality, just honest, will die for you, working hard, great guys. But then on the other side, you just have some of the craziest people show up, and you don't really know, like what are you doing here? Like this is like it's just so bizarre. So you have these like really really kooky people show up, and so I would say probably the human. There's like nothing in between, right? There's nothing in between. There's no like, oh yeah, like just a normal average Joe. Yeah. Everybody's either like super stellar or just absolutely crazy. And I don't want to go into that too much, just because all those people. I don't want to sit here publicly and make fun of somebody. But it's very strange. Just some of the characters you come across. And, yeah.
Have you had any trouble specifically in Burma, because that's where kind of the focus is, of getting in and out of there? Mm-hmm. I know that we need to be cognizant and cautious of how much detail you provide to ensure that you can continue to do what you do. But to the best of your ability, if you could kind of expound on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, where we go in. So keep in mind, so the Burma Army, right? They are the government. So when we go into Burma, we can't just fly into the country and be like, hey, we're here to help the guys and
Team America.
Yeah, exactly. We're here to help protect the people that you're trying to rape and murder, right? So anytime we do go into the country, it's like we're not going in there getting a stamp from the Burma Army on our passport. Instead, we'll go into areas legally that are controlled by the pro-democracy ethnic groups that we work with. And so like the civilian authorities and stuff, they all know that we're there. We're not like sneaking ourselves in there. Yeah. They know that we're there. And so that's how we'll get in. Yeah.
And as far as like big medical equipment, whether it's, I don't know if you're sourcing vehicles through grants or, but a lot of stuff you got to bring with you. Are you flying with that? Are you sending it ahead of time?
So that's That's another thing that we'll source in the countries around where we're working, and sometimes we'll source it in Burma. And so the locals, they almost all the time they'll have some kind of solution where they can figure out where to get stuff, and they'll get it in. So we're not flying over there with trucks from the U.S. It's like we'll find a good high quality used truck that's there somewhere in the region, and and they have their ways of getting that stuff in.
So I can only imagine or assume that you run into, because I know with the foundation that I'm a part of, we run into the same kind of problem where people want to donate stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, because like for us, it's like dog food and beds and blankets and, you know, stuff that unfortunately we just can't really use because of the nature of the dog and their needs and their destructivity, if you will. Mm-hmm. You know, if people are like, hey, you know, I want to donate fucking body armor or medical supplies or whatever, are you just like, hey, thanks, but no thanks, money is the best thing that you can do? Because
unfortunately, yes, but there's a reason for that. So yes, there are a lot of medical supplies and things that we need, and that we have to purchase, but it's actually cheaper for us to purchase those items over in Asia, where half of them are made, right? Yeah. Than to have a big duffel bag full of whatever that we then have to transport overseas. And keep in mind, it's not just 1 or 2 bags, right? It's massive amounts of stuff. And so, and then also the other issue then too is as we're traveling around, now that becomes logistically a big problem. And they're like, what are you doing with 1,000 tourniquets in your bag? And you're like, oh, well, we're doing, whatever. So it just causes problems, unfortunately, because we do have a lot of people who do want to reach out and help in that way. But we source everything in the local areas where we work. Yeah.
Similar timeline of, from the day you started to as we sit here today, when you look back on everything that you've done, and kind of, both where you started, where you're at now, where you want to go, how do you reflect on that? Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll say we're still very much in our infancy. We're still learning sort of our place and the best way that we can help. I'm as a CEO and leader, I'm learning by making a lot of mistakes and going, oh, we should have done this differently, or we should have done that differently, or we should not have hired that guy, or we should have hired that guy, or we should have, whatever. It's stuff like that. There's so many different things that I'm learning. So for me, the key word is just growth and improvement, and we'll do better next year. We'll do better next year and the year after that. So we're still very much in our infancy and finding our best way to help. I think I know that this ambulance service that we're now running is a huge way for us to help tons and tons of people in the most critical moment of their life, and it might be the last moments of their life if we're not there. And so it's been interesting to sort of evolve and see where the best place is for us to help. One of the other things that we haven't talked about that we're starting to do now too is we're starting to work a bit in Africa. So again, before I say what I say next, our focus is always on humans. Our focus is always on people and families caught in conflicts. But one of the conflicts now that we're going to be focusing on a little bit and sort of expanding over time is the poaching wars and things that are going on in different countries in Africa. And so this last year, I spent a little bit of time in Africa and working at a national park, working with, I was in Mozambique specifically, and we were working with the park rangers and learning about how all of that works. And there's so many civilians that live in the national parks, that live around the national parks, and there's Chinese crime syndicates that are funding drugs and illegal mining and illegal logging, and of course going after the animals and the insane cruelty to the animals. And then you have the park rangers who are caught in the middle of all that, trying to help the villagers, but then also trying to protect the animals. And they're sometimes getting shot at, but sometimes there's also malaria, right? So there's these very complicated situations that surround sort of the poaching wars, if you will. So over this, we started a little bit last year, and then going into this year as well, we're starting to sort of ramp up our support there as well for the people in those conflicts. Again, we have a lot to learn there, so I can't at this moment say definitively here's exactly what we're going to do. What I do know for sure is that we're actually creating an entirely new sort of training course that's specifically for a medical training course that's specifically for park rangers in Africa. When I was there in this past October, we were there doing our normal medical training thing, but we realized really quickly with the park rangers that are out there, they are so isolated, in many ways even more isolated than in Burma. And so when they have a medical emergency, sort of, TCCC golden hour protocol, it doesn't work. It's not a thing. And there's so many other dangers out there. And so they have to work medically in a different way. It's a little bit tactical. It's a little bit remote medicine. It's a little bit of, first responder EMT, but they need to be able to stabilize patients and take care of them for longer amounts of time. So we're actually creating a whole new curriculum for that with our medical director.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's really cool that that's kind of the next phase. Do you have a 20-year plan? I mean, is there I want to get this to this point before I step aside? Is this something you're going to do the rest of your life?
I definitely don't have a 20-year plan. That's so far ahead. I barely know what's going on in 6 months. I would say 4 or 5 years from now, I want to get to the organization to a point where we're large enough to where we can have expand the staff. So my original reason for founding Stronghold was because I was in the SEALs and I was in traveling around and doing different stuff with the SEALs, and I saw that there was just other conflicts where nobody was helping, and I remember the frustration from all the guys on the team. We're like, man, we're a 4-hour helicopter ride away from where villages are being destroyed, right, and people are being raped and murdered. Let's go in and schwack these bad guys. So I wanted to create something where we could hire guys. I wanted to be able to hire like my teammates and be able to, hey man, when you get out of the military, hey, come continue to use those skills that you have in a very like in a very like humanitarian way. And then if things do go bad, you can defend yourself, you can defend the people, and you can get into these areas and you can do this humanitarian work. So that what I'm trying to say is I hope that 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're able to have a lot more guys on staff, and I can provide a lot more jobs for these veterans. To be able to go and serve other people who would never be able to hire them, for their services.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's a noble and valiant thing that you do, and got the utmost respect for you and your guys. I think it's amazing. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to add?
No, that's pretty much it. The one thing I will say though, just at the end, is again, thank you to all of your listeners for helping keep Stronghold alive. All the stories I told today, everything that we talked about today, most likely would not have happened if people hadn't really rallied to our cause and really helped us a few years ago. So it's huge. And if anybody wants to continue to, or anybody else wants to support us, our website is strongholdrescue.org. And we'd love to have your support.
One thing that we've started in a tradition here with Mic Drop is a parting gift for the guest. First and foremost is a coin with the Mic Drop and team logo on it, and then also Champion's Choice Silver and John Johnson out in California have been big supporters of the show and have provided a really cool belt buckle for every guest. So.
This is the greatest belt buckle I've ever gotten. That's
awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah,
no, that's so cool. Thank you so much. That's great. Absolutely. I'm in Texas. You got to have a belt buckle.
A fucking belt buckle to go with the hat that you don't have, right?
Exactly.
But, so thank you to Champion Choice and John for making that happen.
Yeah.
Thanks again to the listeners. You guys are amazing and never cease to amaze me with the support of so many different guests. So thank you to you all. It's much appreciated. Keep doing what you're doing. Not that you need me to tell you that, I guess, but I just again am in awe with everything that you do and the places that you've gone. I guess on a personal note, like, do you want to get married? Do you want to have a family?
Yeah, I absolutely do want to get married. I want to have a family, and that's part of the reason why I want to get more and more staff. So I have to do less and less. Like in the field, I can start to kind of pull back a little bit and look at higher level, deal with the higher level tasks of the organization. We're definitely not at that point yet, but I would love to have a family and all that for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for coming. I appreciate the update. Every couple of years, I think it makes sense for you to come on with all the different things you guys have going on. So
sure.
Thank you for coming and making the time. Amazing story. Appreciate everything that you do. And thanks again to the listener for all your guys' amazing support of Ephraim and Stronghold. So we'll put links in the description for how you can reach out and support his organization and him. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this update. So until next time, this is Mic Drop.